Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video.
Harry had been intending to get to the dwarves for a while, and he had decided to get to it sooner rather than later, before Thor's coronation ceremony. That had come as no surprise to him, with how Odin had been subtly testing him, asking him for advice on how to handle one situation or another. Harry didn't think Thor was unaware either. Either way, Harry wanted to make contact before that, so that with the new king, some past grievances could be addressed and resolved. Harry was also no fool and knew the island would soon see Odin and Frigga much more regularly. They had intimated their desire for some peace and quiet for a while now, and Harry suspected Frigga wanted to spend some time with the nymphs. What they were planning, he had no idea, but he would worry about that later. For now, he was focusing on his latest project. He was making a sword. The base weapon had an array of strengthening and sharpening runes on the toughened gold titanium alloy, which would make it nearly indestructible and as sharp as a razor. Then a layer of adamantium was added and engraved by lasers with the same array of runes before the metal set completely. Harry was happy with the result, but had thought that he could do better, so he added a layer of vibranium over the adamantium. He tried applying the runes again, but found that the nature of vibranium refused to take the magic for the runes, and simply dispersed it over its surface. This was a snag he had not foreseen, but he should have, because they had been working with vibranium for a while now. Yondu had worked a deal with some of the other Ravager factions, vibranium for bottles of fire whiskey. The stuff had made him a legend with the people that traded with him, and they were falling over themselves to get their hands on the liquid gold. Yondu was smiling all the way to the bank these days, not to mention that he had been able to buy his way back into polite society, when it came out that he had helped the Guardians protect the galaxy again. Harry had set that weapon aside after removing the vibranium, as he had an idea for whom it would be an ideal gift. Then he set to work again. He would have to skip the vibranium, but he had another idea, for which he needed to speak to Pym first. Dr. Pym was reluctant to help, and because Harry didn't want to proceed without him, Harry had to reveal his plan to Pym. So you want to make a giant sword from titanium, add magic runes that will make it sharp, indestructible, and reduce its weight, and then you want to shrink it down to add even more density to the resulting weapon. Is that about right? Hank asked. I'm hoping that it will also reduce the edge of the sword to be even sharper, Harry said honestly. Why do you want to do this? Hank asked. Even better, why should I let you use my particle for yet another weapon? I do understand your hesitation, and if you decide it's off the table, I'll respect your decision and simply use magic. I was just hoping to try it, even if just once, Harry pleaded. Hank looked at him for a couple of seconds while contemplating, then sagged. While your idea has merit, there are some things that you don't know. Are you familiar with what happens when metal is tempered? He asked. Metal is made stronger by adding elements and using different heating and cooling methods, right? Harry half answered. That's part of it. Hank allowed. What you need to know is that when an item already has a very rigid molecular structure and it is further tempered, it can become brittle. I have a suspicion that my particle might have a similar effect. I honestly think that your method will suit you better in this case. Harry nodded with a smile. Thanks, Dr. Pym. You call me Hank, he said with his own smile. You're technically the boss here. I'm nobody's boss, Harry denied. As long as we're all working towards the betterment of mankind, we're all partners in my opinion. I'll take you up on the offer to call you by your first name though. Harry had a thought then. Have you decided if you'd be interested in studying any of the fields of magic my people are researching? Janet has shown some interest in alchemy, Hank said. She said it reminds her of some of the things she saw during her time in the quantum realm. So you're not interested? Harry asked. I'm more interested in finishing my work so that we can get to the quantum realm and study the energies there, Hank said. Currently the study of occlumency and my research are taking up all of my time. Oh right, Harry said lamely. He'd forgotten about that. Well, it was nice to see you again. Is there anything that you need help with? Actually there is, Hank said. Could you please invent some sort of energy drink that doesn't shoot steam out of people's ears? They've been giving you pepper-up potions, Harry asked. The potion was meant to cure the common cold, warm you up when cold, and give you enough of a boost to make it through the day. Repetitive use could lessen its effectiveness. Harry told this to Hank, who coughed. Really? I've been drinking the cure for the common cold as an energy drink, Hank asked, somehow finding the situation less than funny. It seems that way, Harry answered. Here, try this, Harry said as he hit Hank with an enervate. Hank instantly stood more upright and smiled. Now that's what I'm talking about. Bottle that in your set. That's actually not a bad idea, though I have another idea, Harry said as he got a look on his face. I'll set you up with something for that, though you really should rest when you get tired. No amount of magic will make up for a good night's rest. Oh, I know it. Janet has been on my case about taking care of myself, but I'm just excited to be back and doing what I love, with people who listen and don't make demands. Hank said. He indicated at Harry, case in point, who will make demands of me when the Harry Potter doesn't try to force my hand. He stepped away for a second before returning with a small red vial. Don't tell people I gave you this, okay? You can use it for your test. But please don't use it for the final product. I'd rather not have my work be used for weapons, not again. Maybe seeing what happens gives you an idea of what can be done. Harry took the precious vial and slipped it into his pouch. What's that? Hank asked. What this? Harry said, indicating the pouch. It's an expanded bag. I can make one that has a pocket dimension, but that takes way longer and can't hold as much unless I use runes. But I don't like doing that these days. Or expanded bag? Hank asked. I expand the space in the bag till it can hold many times the volume of the outside of the bag. Harry said. Now that would be some interesting magic to research. Hank said, looking at the bag with interest. Could you make one big enough for a person to enter? How don't you know this? I could have sworn you and your wife have been to the island. Harry asked. We have been. Hank said, confused. The guest house has many expansion charms to accommodate many times the amount of rooms that the outside would allow. Harry said. Sometimes it holds as many as 25 different apartments, though that is pressing the limits of the enchantment. I didn't think of that at the time. I just thought it was magic and let it go. Hank had a thoughtful look. It's like you took what I did and decided to do the exact opposite. I make things small and everything else gets bigger by comparison. You make everything bigger while keeping everything at the same size. It's strange that you would come to me to request my help when you obviously already have the means to do what I do and much more. But my magic doesn't make things stronger and more durable when they shrink. Harry countered. That has to do with the way molecules work. I have a suspicion your way would achieve the same thing. Hank said, could you not use the runes you normally use to manipulate gravity in some way? How would affecting gravity help? Harry asked. When something has more mass, it's affected by gravity more, right? Hank asked. So depending on how your magic works, you might be able to make something that has an unstoppable momentum like Thor's hammer if done right. I'm hoping to find out more about that when I finish this project. Harry said. Odin had added some of the enchantments, but the dwarves had made the magic hammer first. Thor had called the metal Uru, which was obviously not something he could just pick up at the local hardware store. Harry added another project to his list, find a way to bottle spells. Then he went back to work on the sword. He conjured a giant knife this time, not wanting to use that many raw materials. He also knew the scale he'd need to work on and his workshop was not big enough. He then proceeded to apply the same runes as before and adding a feather-light rune cluster as well. Because of the size of the knife, he'd had to have the runes written onto it in regular intervals, until the effect was achieved throughout the entire knife. Even with the weight reduced, he couldn't move it by hand. That was fine because he intended to use the particle at this stage anyway. He first scanned the knife with his magic to confirm there were no weaknesses in it, and when that was done, he retrieved the vial from his pocket. Hank had not given him the counter particle to grow it again, so he only had one chance at this. He decided not to try and conjure adamantium over the conjured gold titanium alloy. He would rather just get on with the test. Harry braced himself and let a drop fall on the giant knife. When the entire thing shrunk down to a normal-sized knife, Harry picked it up from the floor. It was still a bit on the heavy side, but he could wield it easily enough, and he wasn't done testing it either. He walked to a wall where a reinforced steel plate was mounted for testing purposes. He lifted the knife to it and stabbed at the steel. The knife went through the inch of steel easily. Wow, he said to himself, I thought it would be brittle. It had gone right through without resistance. This could be dangerous. Harry said as he pulled the blade to get it out of the plate. He had to use his Asgardian blessed enhanced strength only to hear a cling sound as the blade snapped off of the handle. Harry looked at the handle in surprise. When he considered it, he couldn't find an answer, so he decided to ask the expert. He took out his mirror and contacted Pym again. Hey Hank, could I pop over for a quick chat? Sure thing, I've just finished a pot of tea. Hank confirmed. Harry quickly vanished the remnants of the knife before opening a portal and stepping through. The first thing Harry did was hand Hank the vial back. They sat and talked, with Harry showing him the memory and explaining the steps as he went. In the end, Hank could confirm that his theory had been correct. The amount of mass was the problem. Harry would have better luck enlarging something that was normal-sized before sharpening it and then making it small again after adding the runes. Harry had felt quite stupid at this point. After all, hadn't he done exactly that with his personal MSC shell? He thanked Hank for his help and went back to work. 2 weeks later, Harry had finally perfected the sword. It had a thin inner core of vibranium to internalize shock and remove the possibility of snapping the blade due to shock. Then there was the gold titanium alloy outer core, which would take the first set of runes for added durability. It would protect the blade from being overheated and frozen into becoming brittle too. Finally, the outer layer of adamantium was runed by multiple lasers for sharpness and even more durability. While the lasers were doing its work, Harry was applying his own intent-based magic to the sword. Once everything was set, Harry looked at his latest creation in pride. Learning how to do everything that went into the creation of a sword which was shaped like the sword of Gryffindor had taken quite a while. He had considered making a katana, but he suspected it would disappear with Deadpool if he made it. As if to emphasize the thought, he heard Wade's voice whisper, "If you build it, he will come." Harry shuddered and ensured he was still safely in his workshop on Svartalfheim. Each layer had its own purpose, and applying some more modern techniques had left Harry needing to learn a whole new trade, but he had enjoyed the process quite a bit. The enchantments he had made were for the sword to be able to be directed by focusing his will through the hilt or the scabbard, which it was bonded to. That way the sword could be maneuverable by your will alone, whether it was floating or in your hand. The scabbard would make the heavy sword as light as the wielder needed it to be carried comfortably. Another enchantment added weight to swings by increasing its size by applied magic and will. The last ability was for the sword to intercept incoming attacks should the intent behind them be malicious in nature. That last one had taken some doing, as the metal had almost completely set by that point, but he had focused his will and the magic had finally settled into the adamantium. A little known fact was that adamantium could be enchanted only while it was setting, pretty much at the same time as the runes were applied, which was why he needed multiple lasers to do that while he did his enchanting. It failed the first few times until Harry had tapped his ring and forced the process to happen faster. It had cost a large chunk of his saved-up energy from his battery, but it was worth it. He shrunk the sword back to its original size from its formidable 150 feet, and picked up the sword for the first time after the magic had settled into it. Something felt off, until he realized the runes weren't active yet, so he ran his finger along the edge, but not touching it, and added magic to the runes to activate them. Immediately he knew he had done something right, when he heard a soft hum coming from the edge for a couple of seconds before it settled. He held the sword out in front of him while holding its scabbard in his other hand. He felt it pull at his hand and let go to watch as the sword started moving about the room as he willed it. As he got used to its movements, he started moving it faster and faster, fighting imaginary bad guys around his workshop. When he got to the target again, he slashed at it and had to suppress a shudder when it cut clean through the middle of it and didn't even slow at the impact. His smile was huge as he opened a portal to Hank's workshop without calling and walked through. "Hank, I'm finally finished," he enthused before looking around. Hank was having lunch with Janet and had his sandwich raised to his mouth where it had stopped. Janet just smiled and shook her head. "Hello, Mr. Potter." She greeted him, knowing he preferred Harry, but having heard Jarvis calling him that every now and then, apparently to tease him. Harry knew exactly where that had come from and made a note to discuss his displeasure with Jarvis at some future date. "Hello, Miss Van Dyne," he replied in kind. She had asked him to call her Janet after all. "What's so urgent that you couldn't call first?" Hank asked, having placed the sandwich back on the plate. "I'm sorry, Hank, I finally finished that project I told you about," Harry said evasively. "Is that the sword?" Janet asked, pointing to his hip. "You told her," Harry asked. "She's my wife, I tell her everything." Hank shrugged. "My contract allows for it as long as she knows she can't tell anyone else." "Except for Hope, not that I have," Janet assured him. "I know you like surprising people. Speaking of which," Hank said with a gleam in his eye as he eyed the sword at Harry's hip. "Mind if I take a look?" Harry smirked and took hold of the scabbard. He willed the sword out of its sheath and slowly but deliberately had it place itself in the table point first. "I present to you my currently unnamed sword. You didn't say it would be a singing sword," Hank said with just a bit of childlike excitement. "It's not, it's an enchanted sword," Harry said. "A self-propelled or flying sword is usually what fiction refers to as a singing sword," Hank argued. "Let's hope Loki doesn't find out about that," Harry mumbled before he lifted his hand that was not holding the scabbard and directing the sword to lift out of the table. "This one is not self-propelled though. I direct it with the scabbard it's bonded to," he said, indicating to his other hand. "The sword has a vibranium core to protect it from shock and an adamantium coating to protect the edge. Every level that can be has been runed to make the blade as unbreakable as possible, and the blade has a security feature that protects the wielder automatically from attacks delivered with ill intent. Lastly," Harry said as he lifted his hand again and allowed the blade to align itself horizontally between them before it started to grow. It can adjust its size and weight to the point where I don't even think Thor's hammer would be able to push it aside. Hank was looking at the giant floating sword and asked, "What happens if someone steals the scabbard?" Harry shrunk the sword and willed it to enter the scabbard again as he walked over to the counter, where he placed the sword and scabbard on the counter. The sword will always return to the scabbard, much like Thor's hammer always returns to his hand, but the scabbard is bonded to me by means of blood magic. It's also how the sword knows that I am to be protected from attacks that mean me harm. Only I can draw this weapon. Its scabbard and hilt are enchanted to only respond to my touch or those I designate. Hank walked over and tried to lift the sword. It was heavy since it was a large piece of metal, so it didn't surprise him. He tried removing the sword from the scabbard, but it didn't budge. Upon closer inspection, it looked like the hand guard and scabbard were bonded as one. So it's not like Thor's hammer then? It can be lifted, but you couldn't wield it properly, Harry said. Well, it is a little heavy for me, but someone like Thor, Hank trailed off. To Thor it would feel as unwieldy as it does to you. Harry said, it's how the blood and control magic works. Without my will directing it, you'd never get it to work like it should. Also, he said, holding out his hand, and the sword and scabbard ripped out of Hank's grip and returned to his hand. I don't need to have the hilt to summon the whole thing to me. Impressive, Hank said. Now that you have this weapon bonded to yourself, how do you intend to gift it to the dwarves? This one is not meant for them. Harry said, it's an example of what I'm capable of. Hopefully my enchantments speak for themselves. If I can get them to ask me to enchant something for them, then I'll have the window I need. So you're betting on your magic? Janet asked, nodding along. It seemed like a safe bet. I am, Harry confirmed. How long until the coronation? Hank asked. 2 months, Harry said. I'm hoping to have at least made contact by then. Will it take you that long? Can't you just open a portal? Hank asked. I can go to the planet, but the dwarves live on a station that's near their sun, so I'll need to travel there the old-fashioned way. Harry said, can't you go anywhere you can see or have seen? Janet asked. When Harry nodded, she shook her head. Why not just look then? What do you mean? Harry asked. But before she could answer, he already understood. You mean like with my observation decks? She nodded. Harry thought about it before smiling. You may have just jump-started our deep space exploration program. Tony was going to freak out. Glad I could help, Janet said with a smile. Now I can see you want to leave, so go ahead and tell Stark I'll see him at the next alchemy meeting. How did you never mind? See you later, Harry said before apparating to his office. Hello, Mr. Potter, Jarvis said from his office, which now had another mirror set up. Jarvis' mirror had been hidden from normal view, and only he could hear anything from Harry's side. Jarvis' office was not hidden after all. Hello, Jarvis, Harry replied. Is that a sword? Tony asked from his side. Is that what you've been working on for the last couple of weeks? Harry smiled but turned to Jarvis and changed the subject. I'm going to need a small spaceship with a large window in the front, preferably circular. I'll get started on manufacturing, Jarvis said easily. Could you give me dimensions and general purpose, please? Big enough for 2 people, myself as the power source and operator and another as the pilot. Harry said, where are we going? Tony asked. He wouldn't be left out of this project if he had any say in the matter. We're going to visit the dwarves, Harry said with a smile. And that's what the sword is for? Tony asked, really hoping to find out what the sword was about. You'll find out. If you're coming, Harry said with a smile. Do I need to add extra protections? Jarvis asked. I ask because I believe there may be an issue with gravity that close to a sun. He had also heard Thor describe the dwarves' home. I don't know, but it might be a good idea. Harry said he had a suspicion the blessings of Asgard would protect him, but Tony might not fare so well if the gravity was too much. I have started production of one of our standard scout vessels with your requirements in place and some added protections, while some unnecessary features are left out. Jarvis said, I'm assuming this will be a peaceful venture. That's the plan. If necessary, I'll be the weapons system. Harry said. The next day was spent enchanting the small craft with what he had planned. It was going to be fun if it worked, and he was not telling Tony until the time came. It turned out he needed to spend another day on it, since he needed to modify the inside of the ship a bit and to create an enchanted interface. When the next morning arrived, Harry was excited to get going on his mission. He was shocked to see a couple of people he had not thought would be there. Natasha was in her armor and looking ready to kick ass, which was strange because Harry was certain she had other appointments that day. She'd even left earlier than normal. Rocket was there too, chatting with Tony. Hey, what are all of you doing here? Harry asked. I invited them, Tony said. Natasha opened her schedule and Rocket and I were talking runes when Nidavellir came up. Why would you keep something like that to yourself? Rocket asked. Nidavellir is legendary. They make the most powerful, horrific weapons to ever torment the universe. I would very much like to go there, please. He asked with a smile that Harry didn't know to trust. It looked like a cross between a kid at Christmas and a psychopath finding his first murder weapon. And you? Harry asked Natasha. You forgot to mention what your mission today was, so I assumed it was dangerous and that it would be better if I showed up to help. Natasha replied easily. What about your division? Harry asked. Hill is handling it. Natasha said. Hill had been moved from human resources once everything was in place and people were trained to do the job. She felt she could be more useful in other departments. So Fury had suggested she be the head of interdepartmental coordination and cooperation. Basically, he was tired of dealing with Brand and wanted someone to handle all the niceties he didn't have time for. Hill had no issue with that, as it was what she used to do. When Natasha had offered her access to her division and explained her project, Hill had decided that she would base her office out of Natasha's division from then on. She really wanted in on the project as it would see one of the biggest plagues on the planet wiped out within the next 20 years. And so it was that she had come to know Natasha's operation inside and out. Natasha had loved being able to hand certain things over to someone who was probably even better than herself at handling them, specifically seeing when she didn't need to step in. Natasha was always a hands-on type of person. I'm not objecting. Harry said, just be aware that I'm trying something new in this ship. Once we get to Nidavellir, I'll be speaking to whoever comes to see us. After that, I want to try something fun. When you say fun and look like you've got no idea if it will work, I worry. Tony said, I'm almost certain it will work, but just in case, make sure you have your port keys available, please. Harry said. Everyone nodded and Harry led them into the mostly tube-shaped craft. Inside there were 2 seats in front of 2 spherical windows. One of the seats were in front of the pilot's chair, and the other was for the operator. Only Harry knew how that would work, so that was his seat. Since there wasn't any other seats, Harry conjured 2 seats slightly behind and above the main 2. Didn't this thing only have 1 window? Tony asked. He had seen the plans in the front of the ship. There was definitely only 1 large spherical window there. It's part of my enchantment, Tony. Harry said, once we get to space and I start doing my thing, you'll only be able to go backwards and forwards. Anything else and we might die. Also, I incorporated some MSC shells for propulsion. I can't have my magic tied up if we need it for something else. How many? Rocket asked. 5. Harry said. 5. Why would you need that much power? Tony asked. He knew how much that was. We won't need that much. Harry said. It's in case of emergency. Better safe than sorry. He decided not to tell them about the magical self-destruct. If it came to that, he expected them to port key out first and then he'd activate the function. He really hoped he wouldn't need it, though. He hadn't tested the implosion enchantment yet, but knew giving it such a large power source to pull from before activation could make for a devastating effect. Everyone settled in and Harry waited for Tony to run a systems check. It wasn't strictly necessary, but he'd insisted they take every precaution. It didn't even cross his mind that he had only thought to do that after Natasha had decided to join them. When they were ready, Harry opened a portal to the planet and they flew through. Then they went up a decent clip. Tony was taking things slowly since he knew they had all day for the trip. He also activated the Erder and sound systems. They were soon streaming music directly from home. Rocket, apparently never having heard rock and roll like this, took a few minutes to get used to it, but soon was bobbing his head to the music. This is so much better than Quill's music, Rocket said. Everybody has their own tastes, Harry said. There is no such thing as better music, only music you appreciate more than other music. There's definitely such a thing as bad music, though. Tony disagreed. Not everybody is as talented as the next person after all. Fair enough. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about listening to bad music, Harry said. Once they reached space, Harry asked Tony to stop them and then he engaged his new enchantment. It functioned a lot like a combination between the enchantment that allowed blind people to see and the observation decks on the Midnight. He closed his eyes and instantly saw the outside of the ship. Next, he focused on the star he could see closest to them. Since it was magical sight, he could adjust what he saw and there was no chance of him burning his retina. As with the observation deck on Midnight, when Harry focused his sight, his perception changed and suddenly he was closer. This was where the new idea came in. He had built some of Tony's rune-induced field generators into the ship. As per the original type, they had to be specifically attuned to the purpose Harry intended them for, which he had done. He put his hands down on the armrests, which was connected to 2 separate systems, and powered the first portal projector. This projector worked by connecting just in front of the ship with what was being seen. The best part about this was that once the portal was projected in front of you, you could suddenly see further ahead of you, allowing you to make the portal twice as far away with the second portal projector. Cancel the first portal and do it again, and your magnification went 3 times as far, etc., etc. Did you just create a new kind of jump ship? Rocket asked as he watched the portals flash in and out of existence as the view in front of the ship moved closer and closer to the star very quickly. I'm still the only one that can actually generate this specific kind of portal, but I'm told Jane Foster and Eric Selvig are getting close to trial runs. Harry said, we set them up on the moon base. Tony said they've got access to the quantum computer there. It's apparently been a great help in processing the permanent portal we have set up for them to test with. Last I heard they were months away from successful testing. Natasha put in. You mean to say that you've got people working on making magic portals? Rocket asked. I really need to start spending more time on Earth. You guys keep on coming up with more and more interesting things. I thought you were only interested in weapons. Tony asked. Rocket smirked. What would happen if Harry decided to open up a portal in someone's ship, specifically one that opens to the heart of a supernova? Tony shuddered. You've really got a mind for destruction, don't you? You have no idea, Rocket said. I once made a handheld plasma weapon that could blow up small moons. Back then I only had spare parts to work with too. Imagine what I'll be able to do with knowledge from Nidavellir and runes. Combine that with superior technology from across the universe and then you'll have a small idea of what I'm working with. Rocket sounded like he was salivating at the idea. He's still under contract, right? Tony asked Harry worriedly. Yup. Harry said he wasn't worried. Chances were that Rocket would end up being the biggest contributor to Earth's defenses in the future. While the conversation had carried on, Harry had magnified his view a couple more times and now they were staring at what appeared to be the space station Thor had talked about. Take us through, Tony. The portal feels right. Wait, this is your first test of this kind of portal? Rocket asked with worry and a bit of excitement in his voice. I can make a normal one now. But where would be the adventure in that? Harry smirked. He knew it would work, but hearing Rocket worry was completely worth it. He stayed connected to the observation enchantment while they flew through and looked for appropriate landing coordinates. He couldn't see anything, so he turned on the primary function on his window. Suddenly Harry's window showed what he was looking at. Does anybody see a landing bay here? Harry looked around until Rocket said, there, follow to where those rings go. That would be where they harness the power of their sun. There would always be someone there. Tony followed where Rocket indicated and pretty soon they landed inside the station. Tony had not detected any kind of field, but his systems detected normal gravity and breathable air. When he told them, Harry said, it must be part of the magic I feel here. There's a lot I don't know, but I can tell it is magic. Your welcoming party has arrived. Rocket said, looking out the window. Those are some big swords they're carrying. And they are all enchanted as far as I can tell. It's likely that they can be used as energy projectors too, so be careful. Harry said, I'll go greet the guards and find out if we can arrange a meeting with the man in charge. Better not call him a man when you meet him, he might consider it an insult. Rocket said, good point, thanks, Harry said before he got up and left the ship. Natasha following him invisibly, he didn't even care. He knew she could take care of herself. When he was outside and approaching the dwarves, one of them raised his weapon and called, Halt, who enters the domain of Eitri? Good day, my name is Harry Potter Odinson. I come in peace with the hope of trading with the legendary dwarves of Nidavellir. Harry said, Odinson, one of the dwarves asked, you bear no semblance to the All-Father. I call you a liar and a fraud. Present your arms and defend your honor. What? Harry asked. But before he could speak again, the dwarf had started advancing on him quickly. Don't interfere, Harry said to Natasha when he felt her moving off. She did not respond, but he knew she heard him. Harry waited until the dwarf was almost on him before he apparated behind the dwarf. I will only warn you one time. I do not take attacks upon my person lightly. If I have caused offense in some unknown way, I will apologize, but if you attack me again, I will respond with equal force. The dwarf seemed to consider it for only a split second before rushing at him again. Harry took hold of the scabbard and willed his sword to defend him. It was out of the scabbard instantly and blocked the enemy strike with the flat of the blade. Do you not know how a sword works, magician? The dwarf shouted. I had hoped to spare you your weapon, as I can tell it was crafted with skill. Harry said. When the dwarf smirked, Harry shrugged and willed the sword to grow. Soon the dwarf was looking at a blade that made him look like the one facing down a giant, reversing the field of battle nicely. Behind you, came Natasha's whisper, and Harry turned quickly and activated his ring, making himself intangible. The other dwarf had approached and was about to cut him in half. It turns out it was completely unnecessary, as the giant floating sword suddenly moved to block the strike. Interesting, Harry said as he decided to see what his blade could do. He remained intangible and allowed the blade to take over protective duty. Without his will on it, the blade shrunk back to its original size, but that didn't mean it was any less effective. The two dwarves were soon fighting a losing battle to try and hit Harry. Every hit was blocked and soon one of the dwarves' swords lost its blade as Harry's sword cut clean through it. I did warn you about that. Are you a coward that hides behind your sorcery, magician? The dwarf with the broken sword asked. I am a wizard, Harry said. Call me a magician or a coward again and I will take offense, and if I was here to kill, I'd look like this. As he finished the statement, his armor appeared and he let his magic free from its control, allowing it to roll off him in waves. Stop, came a great voice from the entranceway. Spare my guards and we may speak. A wild-looking dwarf said as he walked up to them. He seemed no different than the other two, but Harry could feel a sense of power coming from the dwarf. Are you the one they call Eitri? Harry asked. I am he. Eitri confirmed. If you could please ask your assassin to remove himself from behind me, I would greatly appreciate it. I can feel your power radiating through him and do not wish for bloodshed this day. He left unsaid who he thought would be bleeding, but Harry was certain he hadn't meant himself. She is not an assassin but a bodyguard. Harry said. Had one of your guards actually posed a threat, she would have ended them. Eitri asked in shock. You allow a woman to enter battle. I would trust her with my life over any man, Harry said. Eitri did not respond, but Harry saw a twinkle of hidden intelligence in his eyes. Harry suspected that these dwarves didn't look down on women as much as they wanted to protect them. When I met her, she was considered the most deadly assassin on my planet. She has since only gained in power. I believe she can take care of herself. Eitri nodded when he saw Natasha appear behind Harry. The sword was still hovering between Harry and the guard with the sword. It is customary to disarm yourself in the presence of the king, he said. Then your guard should not have attacked Harry. Natasha said. He may be a prince of Asgard, but he is also the king of New Atlantis, and your men attacked him without cause. I should kill them where they stand for their insult. She said this with a calm tone in her voice, no threat in her posture except for a certain readiness that promised consequences for any further trouble. Eitri was shocked. He had not heard of any new sons of the royalty of Asgard, but these people were not lying. He could sense the blessings of Asgard on the man and knew he needed to respond correctly. My apologies, King Harry. We had not been informed that you even existed. It is not your fault, Harry said. You were not informed, so you could not know. That does not excuse the attack upon my person, but I dare say your guard has paid enough with the loss of his sword. My king. Natasha objected, knowing she was playing the role of a devoted follower and bodyguard. Your guard is right to object, Eitri said. He should be punished, but if you see fit to forgive him, I too feel the loss of his sword is punishment enough. It took him many years to perfect its design. Harry nodded. May we speak in a more comfortable locale? I believe we have much to discuss. I also have two others who wish to meet the legendary dwarves of Nidavellir for themselves. Eitri nodded first to the other guard, who sheathed his sword, and then at Harry. We may adjourn to my council chambers where I can provide you with something to drink while we speak. Harry nodded. I will be but a moment. As Harry walked past the guard with the broken sword, he took pity on the man who looked like someone who had lost a favorite pet. If you promise to be more respectful to me and mine, I will try to fix your weapon for you. It is beyond repair. The guard mourned. But if I was able, would you promise? Harry asked. The guard looked up and saw only honesty in Harry's eyes. I swear it, he said instantly. Harry nodded and focused his magic on the sword. He levitated the two parts up and held them together. Whatever the sword was made of was very strong as it resisted his magic, so he forced more power into the repair and ended up having to tap into his battery. A full minute later, the sword lowered itself into the guard's waiting hands. Remember your oath, Master Dwarf, and you will find that my people will treat you with similar respect. The guard nodded in stunned silence. He had just witnessed a miracle. Who commanded such magics that they could bend the very essence of magical metal, which is Uru, with their power alone. When he looked up, there was a look of respect having replaced the belligerence that was there before. I will keep my oath, King Harry, but you have earned my respect this day, he said as he slammed a fist against his breastplate. Harry nodded and walked back to the ship where Tony and Rocket were waiting. You just couldn't help yourself, could you? Tony asked. You just had to get into a fight and then be magnanimous in victory. Do you know a better way to make friends? Harry asked. Tony just shook his head and made his way out of the ship. Nice sword, by the way. I didn't know you knew how to do that. I have only the barest knowledge of sword fighting, but the sword is enchanted to protect me and I was out of phase the entire time. Harry scoffed. They couldn't hurt me if they tried. I like you more every time I learn something new. Rocket said that sword was a beauty. If he thought it was possible, he might just attempt to steal it, but chances were it would simply cut his hand off if he tried. Still, it might be worth having a prosthetic to own a sentient blade that could defend you from any incoming attack. What if the magic of their blades could hurt you even while you were out of phase? Tony asked. Harry tried not to let the panic that flashed through him show. He had not thought of that. Good thing the sword was good enough to protect him. We'll have to look into that in the future, he whispered as they approached the waiting King Eitri. Your magic is formidable, Eitri said as he led them to the council room. I have never seen anyone fix a blade that was completely broken and restore its enchantments at the same time. It is one of my specialities. Harry said, I am an enchanter by nature, though honesty does compel me to tell you that I did not know I was restoring an enchantment. It does explain why it took so much power, though. I can see your magic takes the form of creational forces. It is something that I have seen very rarely in my 1,000 years. Only twice, in fact. Eitri said, the other time was a couple 100 years ago when we went to Midgard with the forces of Asgard. The man's name then was Meodin Imrise, I believe. Harry stopped dead in his tracks. Did you just say Meodin Imrise, like Merlin? Is that what they call him now? Eitri asked, continuing his walk. I only heard his name later, but his magic was much like yours. I saw it from a distance as he caused a volcano to erupt and engulf half the forces of the frost giants. He simply vanished after that. Harry caught up and put the thoughts aside for now, something to research later. How does your enchantments work? He asked. Eitri laughed. You have yet to speak to me properly and you already want my secrets. I think not, young wizard. He seemed to consider something for a moment. If you are willing to share your secrets with me, I might be willing to share some of mine with you, though. He indicated the sword on Harry's hip. That is a fierce weapon. What is its name? It doesn't have one. Harry said. This seemed to insult the dwarf. Such a mighty weapon should have a name. It will be sung of in legend, certainly. To cut through a dwarven blade like it did is a mighty feat. I'll share a little secret with you, Harry said with a smile. The smaller it is, the sharper it becomes. When it was big, I was trying to save your guard's weapons. Eitri's eyes widened and then he laughed. Truly. The men shall be devastated to know you were merely toying with them. I was not toying, Harry said honestly. If they were trying to actually kill me, I'd have cut them down with my magic while the sword protected me. He looked up at the dwarf who was considering his words. Since they were testing me, I decided to test them back. Eitri had been waiting just outside of view for a reason after all. It was also why Harry restored the sword. It wasn't the guard's fault. He was simply following orders. Eitri didn't show any shock at having been found out, but nodded at Harry. You are an observant one, he said as he opened a large door for them. Then he pointed to the large chairs as he took a seat opposite them. Harry applied some magic to make things more comfortable for his friends and himself after floating everyone up to their seats. The man wasn't an actual giant, but he was somewhere between Hagrid and a giant's size, so the chairs left something to be desired. Then Eitri pulled out a bottle of something strong smelling. I hope you don't mind. We don't have much to offer when it comes to drink, except for strong and plenty. He poured them each what amounted to a shot glass but were more than enough in their hands. Then he lifted the glass to a peaceful discussion. A peaceful discussion. Harry repeated and took a sip. It did not surprise him when his taste buds immediately objected to both the strength of the flavor and the alcohol content. Wow, that's strong. Eitri laughed. It is what we have unless you want water. Tony decided to step in at this point. Harry, if you wanted, there is still the stock standing at the brewery for the next order from Asgard. I know you're not allowed to sell the Odin's brew, but maybe a barrel of 50-year-old Asgardian fire whiskey will work for Eitri. Harry nodded. It's a good idea. He lifted a hand and turned a portal. Then he levitated a barrel and a bottle of the normal fire whiskey through the portal. He put the bottle in front of himself and vanished the contents of their glasses while placing the barrel in front of Eitri. King Eitri, please keep this a secret from Asgard. They wouldn't like to know that I'm giving their drink to other people. Technically, they haven't paid for it yet, so it's ours to do with as we please. Tony said. Harry nodded in acceptance. Please, King Eitri, help yourself. Harry conjured a large tap in the barrel and levitated it so that it would be easier for the dwarf to access. Eitri downed his own cup before refilling from the barrel. While he was doing this, Tony was pouring for the three of them. To new experiences. Tony toasted. He hoped for a lot to come from this contact. Maybe they can work a deal for adamantite in the future when they finally figure out the formula. New experiences, Eitri said and took a sip. His eyes bulged before he lifted the cup higher and downed the entire contents. This is a miracle, he said as he looked at the barrel. It is replenishing my own power and I can feel the calming effect. Nothing about the fire? Tony asked. He likes seeing people cough. Fire is something I am very familiar with. Eitri smiled as he poured himself another drink. This though, he indicated the barrel, this is something worth coming to the negotiation table for. Just our luck, Tony laughed. You come to this table willing to discuss magic and buying supplies. But the beverage you serve ends up stealing the spotlight. King Eitri, Harry started. We came here today to discuss your relationship with Asgard. Eitri looked at Harry through narrowed eyes. Which one? There's more than one, Harry asked. Tell me what you know first if you would, King Harry. Eitri said, please call me Harry. Harry said, I don't know much, all I know is that there is tension between yourselves and Asgard. I was hoping to find out the cause. You are young, Eitri said, looking at the drink contemplatively. You would not know the full history here. Then he looked at Harry. What do you know of Hela? Harry was not happy. His meeting with Eitri had ended shortly after the revelations of Asgard's past. He had promised to return no matter what happened because of what he found. Eitri's people had been made to bend a knee more than 2,000 years ago. Back then King Odin and later his daughter Hela had decided to conquer the 9 realms. Until Odin had a change of heart and banished his own daughter to Hel, where she still resided, trapped on a planet where the dead make their home. Harry kept his voice in line when he entered the throne room, not surprised to see his brothers and mother there as well. The rest of the room was empty. Harry knew Heimdall had warned Odin, so he walked up to the man and asked, well, as he crossed his arms. Odin looked wearily at him. Do you not even greet me before you make such heavy demands of your father? Harry's eyes fell as did his arms to the side of his body. I'm sorry, he apologized. Hello, father, he said with a nod of the head. I'm sure you understand the cause for my agitation this day. Hello, my son, I do indeed know what troubles you. Odin nodded his head. This is about your sister Hela. Thor looked at Odin askance. Father, Odin, having realized Harry was maintaining control, decided to go to a less formal setting. Let's adjourn to the family room where we can discuss this in peace. The family followed him with varying degrees of concern pointed at the two who had spoken. Thor was looking at his father, while Frigga was worried about Harry, and Loki's attention was on both Harry and Odin. Harry was worried for Loki's reaction to hearing this. If Odin could banish his own flesh and blood, what would he not do? When they arrived at the family room, Odin took a seat at the head of the reasonably small breakfast table where they had eaten as a family many times. He hoped to draw on the good memories there to bolster the family who he feared would turn against him soon. When everyone was seated, he began. Many years ago, I was an ambitious youth who yearned for battle, not unlike Thor himself not too long ago. I did not have a father that pulled me aside and tried to teach me the virtues of peace. Nor do I hate the actions of my youth today. I cannot say how the realms would have fared without me, but the delicate peace between the worlds we have now did not exist then. Combining the worlds under one banner seemed the only way at the time. Odin said, before looking at Harry, if we had your gifts for artifice and your vision for uniting a people based on what we could do for each other, I suspect we could have saved many lives, but we were not that fortunate back then. As I said, I enjoyed battle, and when my daughter Hela came of age, she joined me on the battlefront. She was magnificent with a sword and soon carved out a name and aspect for herself that nobody could argue against, and so she became the goddess of death. For she could not be bested, and all who stood against her was met with death. When I hungered for battle no longer and saw the worlds were at peace, I realized we had no need to make war on any of the 9 realms over which we ruled, but Hela wanted to expand on our domain, forever growing what we control and subjugating as many as she could. I tried speaking to her, but her mind was set, and she could not be made to see reason. When I realized there was no speaking to her, that her bloodlust ran too deep, I banished her to Hel, where her connection to Asgard was severed and she could not muster the power to return to our realm or bring war and ruination to others. Odin finished. There was a long silence before Harry turned to Frigga. Mother, what do you say on this matter? Frigga looked at her son and he could see the edge of fear in her eyes. Hela is not my daughter, but that of a previous consort of Odin's. Still, she was a beautiful girl as she grew up. Mischievous but not malicious. She liked to spend time with the Valkyrie and hear stories of battle. I suspect now that she had leanings toward battle even then, but it wasn't as all-encompassing as it became. Allowing her to join Odin in battle was my choice, and I blame myself for that choice even now. So, you're saying that she has a bloodlust now that she didn't have before? Thor asked. He had a sister, but she sounded lost. He too had seen the edge of fear on Frigga's face. He could see now that perhaps his father had made the correct decision. He had never seen this kind of fear in her eyes before. It seemed wrong somehow. That being said, Harry had been able to bring Loki back from the edge of madness. Odin nodded in agreement. When we failed to pull her from her crazed desire, we had no choice. She was driven to acts of violence, and she had killed some of her attendants in fits of pique. You're saying there's no reasoning with her, that she would attack any who approach? Harry asked. Harry, my son, please don't do this. Odin pleaded. I can see your mind is already being made up, but I must implore on you to not go there, to reconsider. How could I? Harry asked. I have no memory of that place. I do not know where to find it even. He looked Odin in the eyes. But when I find out where it is, I will be going there. I can't believe you would banish someone to such an existence. If she is alone in hell and has been for thousands of years, then she is surely mad. Wouldn't it be better to put her out of her misery? You are no match for her strength. Odin said. He knew he couldn't refuse Harry now that he knew of Hela. It was simply not in his character to leave someone to suffer. She would attack you even if you were her only chance of escape, as soon as she realizes you cannot be made to give her passage back to Asgard. Then I will take precautions, Harry said stubbornly. He took his scabbard in hand. I am also not as defenseless as you seem to think. His sword shot out of its sheath and aligned itself with the floor before it started growing. My new blade is enchanted to withstand nearly anything and to defend me automatically. Even Mjolnir could not destroy this blade by my reckoning. Thor didn't hesitate to try this theory, as he swung his hammer and slammed it against the sword. There was a mighty clang as the adamantium was hit, but the vibranium core did what it was supposed to and internalized the impact as the sword stood its ground without a dent. Impossible, Thor exclaimed. You have made something that can stand up to a weapon made by the dwarves. He made something that can destroy weapons made by the dwarves, Natasha said as she came out of invisibility, having followed Harry. No chance was she leaving him alone in this state after all. I saw him doing just that earlier today. To be fair, I used the advantages of 2 uniquely qualified metals to achieve that feat, Harry said. Then he turned to Odin as Frigga got up to hug Natasha with a sad smile. She was glad Natasha had gone with him. She really appreciated that Natasha would always be there for Harry. What say you now, father? Do you still think me ill-prepared for this journey? Who better to face your daughter, my sister, than me? I am, after all, the master of death. What? Loki spoke up for the first time. When did this happen? It is part of Harry's gifts from before he came to our reality. He is not proud of it and does not advertise it, Natasha said. Please don't think badly of him for not telling you, as he only told your family when he had no choice when you dragged him to Asgard against his will that first time. Loki looked like he was going to object, but decided better and remained quiet. If Harry thought he was going to meet this goddess of death on his own, though, he had another thing coming. Odin looked upset. A kind of anger which Harry could tell was not new on Odin's face, but it soon gave way to reluctant acceptance. Odin knew he could not stop his youngest from making strides to speak to his eldest. If you do this, I cannot condone it. It is forbidden by law to set foot on Niflheim, he said. Once again, the face of a ruler who had to follow the rules he made. I understand, father, Harry said. He could work with that. If that is the law. Odin could tell Harry was planning something and was slightly relieved that at least Harry was engaging his higher brain functions. If Harry could somehow bypass the law without breaking it, he would not have to take action against him. He'd just have to hope Harry lived through the experience. As long as you do not break the law, I will not be forced to take action. He spoke his thought. There was a twinkle in Harry's eye. It was subdued. But he knew Harry had caught his meaning. Good. Let us no longer speak of this. Instead, tell me about this weapon you have created. Harry knew Odin had read his intention to defy the law, but he also knew when he was given a clue. Odin would not help him, but if he got around the law some other way, he'd be safe from reprisal. That's why he let the subject drop. He took a moment to handle his emotions while Natasha retold the story of Eitri's test. When he was done collecting himself and putting his emotions in check, Natasha was almost done with the retelling. That's when he walked up to the dwarven guard and offered to fix the sword. The guard thought it was impossible, but Harry lifted his hands and even I could tell his magic was flaring and there was this visible glow around him. When the two halves struggled to come together, Harry's aura doubled in size and the other guard fell to his knees, joining the first one in shock. The next moment the sword was won and King Eitri was standing there with his mouth open. We later found out Harry's magic had restored the enchantments on the blade even. Truly, Odin asked with shock written on his face. He looked at Frigga, who looked just as shocked but nodded. It seems we have found his divine aspect then. Wait, what? Harry asked. Harry James Potter Odinson, god of artifice and enchantment. Odin said. It made sense. They should have known with everything Harry had made for them since even their second meeting. Congratulations, my son. How can you know? Harry asked. I just fixed a sword, for goodness sakes. Odin shook his head. You fixed a dwarven forged blade with unknown enchantments, but your ability was such that it could find the grain of the enchantment lines and combine them and restore the flow of magic. Eitri would be able to sense such things, which would explain his awe at the feat. Grain? Harry asked. That's right. Odin said. Normal dwarves don't have magic they can wield like you or I. They do, however, have the ability to affect the flow of magic in items and imbue weapons with powers, as long as those who wield the weapons have sufficient power to suffuse them. Eitri is the exception to this. He is a master smith who has developed ways in which to imbue weapons with such awesome might that they take so much energy that only we Aesir, with our gifts, could wield them. Only Eitri himself has enough power that he could claim to do the same. His ability to sense magic and its flow is how he can do what he does. No other dwarf is so blessed. That explains how he sensed Natasha when she was invisible. Harry said. He couldn't see her, but he knew she was there. Harry explained a bit more about the weapon, but as he did so, his mind was already on a new project. By the time he and Natasha left, nobody there was convinced that he had heard all that was said, and they'd be right. Harry was preoccupied to say the least. He was building a plan, and while it was not complete yet, he'd be damned if he didn't give it all his attention until he did. As Harry and Natasha left, nobody saw that Loki had disappeared, as their attention were on the leaving couple. "Loki," Thor asked when they were gone. "I believe he has gone with your brother, to help ensure that whatever scheme he is cooking up doesn't land him in trouble," Odin said, pointing at where the portal had just been. "Then I should go too," Thor insisted. "You cannot, my son," Odin said sadly. "You who are about to be coronated are the one that has to enforce the rules. If they make a mistake or get caught breaking the law, one of your first acts might just have to be to rule judgment over them." Thor looked in shock at Odin, but he could see the sorrow there. Frigga placed a hand on Odin's shoulder. "Heavy is the head that wears the crown," she said while looking at Odin before turning to Thor. "It brought me no joy to keep your sister from you. Your father wanted to spare you the pain of seeing the monster she had become. As king, it was also his duty to punish her severely for her transgressions. Should she ever return to Asgard, those who freed her would be considered traitors to the realm." Thor wanted to speak up, but he realized she was giving him a warning. He needed to consider what he would do. If he didn't uphold the rules the same way his father did, it would call into question his ability to rule. He hoped Loki could keep an eye on Harry. Even more, he hoped they succeeded in such a way that he was not forced to take action. Back on Earth, Loki had decided to become visible. He knew Harry would find him out somehow, since he always did. It would be best if he could speak to Harry anyway. "Greetings, brother," he said with a smile when he was spotted. "I know that gleam in your eye. It has been directed at me a time or two after all." "What do you want, Loki?" Harry asked, not denying his statement. "You know what I plan to do may not be legal, right? If you come with me, you'll be considered an outlaw if something goes wrong." "What is the saying again?" Loki asked with an easy smile to hide his nerves. "Ah yes, been there, done that," he smirked. "Your contract prohibits you from breaking the laws, Loki. You know the consequences of breaking the contract is permanent loss of your powers, right?" Harry asked. "Don't be silly," Natasha said, hugging Harry from the side. She had known he was still not all right and intended to stay with him. "Your contract with him clearly states that he is allowed to protect his people. As long as you are his brother, he is allowed to try and keep you out of trouble." She had always been able to read Loki more easily than most. Not that he minded, really. Her strength would only be a boon to his brother. "Fine," he said, suddenly sobering. "I'm not going to stand in your way, but I'm going to try and help you to do this without breaking Asgardian law, okay?" Harry contemplated his statement, but seeing the determination in Loki's eyes, he nodded. It actually touched him a bit that someone would be that protective over him. Being adopted himself, Loki seemed to be his staunchest supporter. "The guest bedroom is open. You can stay there for tonight. I'll be making a trip back to Nidavellir in the morning if you want to come." Harry then turned and went to bed with his girl. That night as they lay in bed, Natasha asked him, "Harry, what are you planning?" Harry just kept looking at the sky through the enchanted ceiling. "I'm not quite sure yet, but I think I may be considering bringing Hela back to the island." "Are you sure you can control her? She sounds very strong," Natasha argued lightly. She knew Harry would not allow her to hurt any of the inhabitants of the island, so he must be planning on controlling her somehow. Harry nodded. "There are many ways that I can attempt, but I'll probably end up having to have her sign a blood oath." "Blood oath?" Natasha asked. She'd not heard that term before, not from Harry anyway. "Blood magic is one of the strongest and most easily abused forms of magic." Harry started. "Blood and life are considered to be the same. So is life and magic. So blood can have a direct correlation to magic." Natasha finished his thought for him. "Blood, either willingly given or forcibly taken, can be used to empower magic." Harry said, "If I made a magical contract that could bind her power, my power may not be enough to bind her to it if Odin is to be believed. But if she signed in blood," Natasha said with understanding in her eyes, "then her own power would bind her power." Harry nodded. "How will you get her to sign, or do you intend to try forcing her?" Natasha asked. "For this kind of magic, she needs to sign willingly. I could get her blood and add it to the contract myself, but if she signs, it would be impossible to break without consequences." Harry said, "I'll have to make her an offer she can't refuse." "And if she's insane?" Natasha asked. "Then I'll put her out of her misery. If that means I have to break the law, so be it." Harry said irrevocably. "I love you, Harry," Natasha said as she curled up to him. Harry would not be made to kill one of his own family. Not if she could help it. Even if he meant it as a mercy, it would hurt him to be forced to do something like that. "I love you too," Harry said as he closed his eyes and allowed himself to be drawn into sleep. The next morning found Harry, Natasha, Loki, Tony and Rocket walking through the portal to Nidavellir again. King Eitri had told him where he may use his magic to arrive. Upon arrival, the guard, whose sword Harry had repaired, walked up to them, having apparently been awaiting them. "Greetings, King Harry and guests. I have been appointed as your guide upon your return." The dwarf said with a quick bow. I will have you announced and brought to King Eitri. He has much to discuss with you, I am told. Thank you, Master Dwarf, Harry said, nodding at the dwarf, as bowing would be below the station he was portraying himself at. Could I inquire as to your name? I am called Radic. King Harry. The now identified Radic introduced himself. Would it be customary for me to refer to you by name? Harry asked. I don't see why not, Radic said with a broad smile. Come, let me take you to the king, he said as he waved them on. Thank you, Radic, Harry said as he lifted himself up and levitated his friends with him so that the dwarf didn't need to slow down for them. You have many hidden skills, it seems, Radic mentioned upon seeing Harry and his friends floating along behind him. Is this an ability gained through artifice? Yes, Harry said simply. Loki wasn't so easy to silence though. It is a simple feat for my brother, he said. It is, after all, within his divine aspect to create and imbue. Is it now? Came the voice of Eitri as they entered the room where they had held their discussion the previous day. It would explain much, Eitri said. King Eitri. Harry bowed. The others followed his example before they were seated at the table again. Harry was not happy about people referring to him as divine. He preferred blessed. He'd never consider himself a god, even one with a small g. It was just not something he was interested in. He knew people like Voldemort would have loved it. My brother's aspect has only recently been identified by Odin himself, Loki continued once he was seated. Harry supplied the same barrel as the previous day, and when Loki looked at him through narrowed eyes at seeing the Asgardian fire whiskey, Harry shrugged. King Eitri was kind enough to offer us of his drink at our last meeting, so it was only fair to return the favor. And did you inform King Eitri of the value of the gift you so easily bestowed upon him? Loki asked. He did not, but I can tell it is of the highest quality, Eitri said. We would be willing to pay for such services in the future, he assured them. Consider this one a gift, Harry said. I did, after all, stop by without calling first. To that end, he said, sticking a hand into his pocket and removing a shrunken mirror from it. I offer you this. It is a communications mirror. All you need to do is hold it in your hand and speak my name, Harry Potter, and you will be connected to me. Likewise, if I wish to speak to you, I will say Eitri and be connected to you. Harry showed him how to accept and close the connection. If Odin permits, you may also call for him on his mirror. But I would suggest you speak to Heimdall first. He has one of these as well. He said, what an interesting enchantment. Eitri nodded and inspected the mirror. Harry had reinforced it and decorated the back of the mirror with a steel image of two fists grasped together. He hoped the gift would be seen as the first step towards reconciling the differences between Asgard and Nidavellir. I find it strange how your magic seems to cling to your enchantments. Ours are inlaid in the metal during the crafting of the weapon. It's how my magic works. Harry said, how long do your enchantments last? I can tell it won't last forever like mine does. Eitri said, except for your sword, part of its enchantment was ingrained through the use of symbols of power, which uses your magic or ambient magic to operate. Correct. That would be rune magic. Tony spoke up. Hi, we haven't been given the chance to talk really. I'm Tony Stark, billionaire, inventor, philanthropist, Iron Man, rune master and space explorer, in that order. Harry had wondered when this would happen. Tony had been uncharacteristically quiet of late. Apparently he had been waiting for a subject that they could communicate about. And I'm Rocket. I'm learning the rune magic too, but my real passion is weapons and making things that explode. Rocket said, Loki, Prince of Asgard and God of Mischief. Loki said, Natasha Romanoff. I'm Harry's bodyguard and partner. Natasha introduced herself. You have a relationship with your bodyguard? Eitri asked. To be fair, most of the time we protect each other, but when we're on mission and I'm visible, she usually isn't, and sometimes it's the other way around. Harry said, the relationship happened before all that though. Remind me to send you an invitation to our wedding next year. Eitri was taking all of this in stride as he sipped from his mug. You surround yourself with capable people and share your power so freely. I can detect your magic all over them. Why did you imbue your friends with such power? He asked. To keep them safe. Harry shrugged. They are my friends and loved ones after all. Your perspective is naive but noble. Eitri allowed, then he sat more upright. What do you want of the dwarves, King Harry? He asked. I told you to call me Harry. Harry reprimanded. And to answer your question, nothing. We want nothing that you don't want to give. An alliance would be nice. But friendship can be just as rewarding. Weapons would be useful, but we can survive without them. Besides that, we would like to start trading with you. Trading, Eitri said, finally seeing what they were after. What would you offer for the wealth of Nidavellir? What do you want? Harry asked. We can offer supplies, transport and access to other realms, different forms of enchantment, and I might even offer my services to repair broken items. There is no need for repairs. Very few have the power to destroy weapons made of Uru. Then he got a gleam in his eye. "Perhaps if you share the secrets of how you created Urubane." "Urubane?" Harry asked. "It is what my people have started calling your sword." Eitri chuckled. "I told you a sword of such power required a name." "It is a good name," Loki said with a nod. "Prestigious, not many can claim having earned it. Only those with the greatest of power who can exceed both the power of the original enchanter and that of the forger can claim such." Eitri agreed. "Since Uru becomes more powerful for those who have more power to bestow, I suspect you would struggle only against those of exceeding strength. Perhaps Mjolnir with Thor wielding it." "Thor already tried his hammer against Urubane," Natasha said with pride. "He couldn't even move it. I may have made that look easier than it was." Harry said, "I felt the impact, though the nature of the sword did make it considerably easier. You and I will have much to discuss about our crafts at some future date, I suspect." Eitri said, "I would have given much to see Thor's entitled face as his favorite weapon failed him. We can arrange for viewing of the memory at some other stage." Harry said with a nod. He'd have to be careful sharing that memory, as he didn't want to share his conversation with Odin with just anyone. As for Thor, Odin has seen to it that most of his entitlement has been humbled. Eitri smiled, but before he could speak, Tony decided it was his turn again. "We've been working on an alchemical process that will change gold into adamantite. Harry tells me your people know metal better than anyone in the universe. Do you think you have anyone around that could help us with that? It would be something we'd be willing to trade for." "We don't have anything like that here, but we have many who would be interested in such a process." "Not that I know what this adamantite is," Eitri said. "It is the Midgardian word for a very rare type of star metal." Loki supplied. "They call vibranium by the same word though." "Truly?" Eitri asked with large eyes. "We have worked with many kinds of strange metals. What are the properties of this adamantite?" "It's very rare, so rare in fact that our other sources have run dry," Harry said, referring to Yondu. He had not been able to find any more, and they were now pressed to start producing as needed. The metal in its natural state can be used to channel magic. Once melted and put through a specific process to bond with other elements, it becomes nearly indestructible. One of the strongest alloys we know of, in fact. Only those with a lot of power can even affect it. I'm fortunate that it reacts well to my magic, otherwise I couldn't reuse the supply I have. It was true. When they found the recipe, it had taken a bit of work. But they soon had the indestructible metal bubbling away in a forge. When it cooled down even a little, it had solidified into a block of solid adamantium. Tony had been distraught at the loss of so much adamantite, but Harry had focused his magic and found that he could transfigure the metal into a liquid state to use as needed, more often than not as a coating. They later found he could do the same with vibranium. But they needed to feed it energy to the point that the metal could not take anymore before it became usable, and that took a lot of power. Harry cheated by using fiendfire whenever he wanted to melt the vibranium down. "Would it be possible for me to inspect some adamantite?" Eitri asked. Harry actually hesitated for a moment before he opened two portals. He retrieved one of the few remaining bars of adamantite through one portal and a brick of adamantium through the other. When both of them were in his hands, he levitated them across to Eitri. "The one on your left is the unmodified base metal. The one on the right is the adamantium alloy." Eitri was inspecting the adamantite closely, and Harry could feel his power was running through the metal, inspecting and almost tasting it. "It seems you are familiar with something very similar to Uru. Adamantite was used in my world as a magically conductive metal. We use it for magical circuitry now. Once it is turned into adamantium, however, it loses that property," Harry said. "Uru is much stronger in its base form and has much the same property, but once infused with magic, it becomes more durable and retains its conductive ability. It could even be compared to this adamantium in strength," Eitri said as he picked up the adamantium brick and tested it too. "Though I have to admit the adamantium is even stronger than Uru, though it should not be able to destroy a weapon made from Uru, especially an enchanted one. Not on its own at least." As he said this, he narrowed his eyes at Harry. "Unless you used vibranium to help protect the blade form impacts." Harry just smiled but didn't confirm anything one way or the other. He was close, but the magic of the runes added even more durability and sharpness. Never mind the expansion and shrinking he used during the process. "You are wise to keep your secrets, but I don't think I'm wrong," Eitri said as he slid both pieces of metal across the table. "The difference, of course, being that Harry's enchantments work differently than yours," Loki said, "and that he uses multiple types." Tony said before looking over at Harry. "You use what, 3 different kinds now?" 4, Harry said, shaking his head. "Are there that many?" Eitri asked doubtfully. "Sure," Harry said as he lay a hand on his scabbard. "I'm not sharing my construction techniques, but I can tell you the kinds of magic." Eitri just watched as the sword removed itself from the scabbard and expanded to a truly massive size, for the first time showing its true capability. The growing enchantment is my standard kind of enchantment. He shrunk it down and slashed at Loki at a truly inspired speed, stopping an inch from his face. To Loki's credit, he didn't even flinch. The movement and control is Asgardian magic, from which I worked out an enchantment. He conjured a large block of steel and had the sword cut clean through it. The strengthening and sharpening enchantments work on both my normal magic and rune magic. The last kind I can't demonstrate, but you have seen it. When your guards attacked me and the sword defended me on its own. The ward magic which protected me without my needing to summon the sword or be aware of the attack is a blood magic ward. That sounds like a dangerous kind of magic. Eitri said. Blood magic can be abused, Harry nodded. But this one responds with equal force and only to defend. The world where I come from had people who did abuse blood magic though. They could do almost anything from making people their willing slaves to darkest resurrection rituals. Harry rubbed at his scar from when he had been used in just such a ritual. Like Harry told you last time, King Eitri, his world is gone. Natasha said, since he is the only person with the knowledge of these magics. We have to trust that he will not abuse his powers. Indeed, he has shown us that he is truly only interested in helping people. Loki said, I was once prisoner for actions against the crown, but he offered me a deal to save my soul, bound me by contract, and later used the self-same blood magic to adopt me by blood into Odin's family. If that's not enough for you, he's got a pet phoenix too. Rocket said, seriously, he just shows up whenever Harry says his name, it's neat. Fox is a familiar. Not a pet, they have a connection of mutual trust and understanding. Natasha said, looking at Rocket, why did you answer for him? Rocket complained, if you said nothing he would have called the bird. I would not mind seeing a phoenix. Eitri said, if this was true then Harry truly was a good person. Even I who has lived 1,000 years has never seen the fabled creature, let alone heard of it creating a familiar bond. Harry looked up and instead of calling urgently asked nicely, Fox, would you mind joining us? We're sitting with a new friend who'd like to meet you. Harry continued staring up for a bit before looking back at Eitri. He said he'll be here in a moment. I think he's making us wait on purpose. He recently informed me that I keep on interrupting him while he's preening his feathers, so I'm asking nicely now instead of calling him like I used to. To be fair, I've never seen him preening, so Harry might have a point. Natasha said. Eitri looked at Harry and wondered if he was not quite right in the head until the phoenix in question appeared in a ball of fire. Awesome. Rocket said he loved the way the phoenix appeared. Eitri was staring as the bird hovered seemingly weightlessly in the air while Harry just looked at it. Then he looked at Eitri. Hold out your arm. Eitri did as requested and the phoenix alighted on it, growing slightly until he was proportionally the right size. I didn't know he could do that. The phoenix chirped, to which Harry responded, well, how was I supposed to know that I should ask? You truly have a bond to an actual phoenix. Eitri said no matter what Harry did, Fox always stole the show. Why would I lie? Harry said. There is much to gain from the dwarves and many have tried to fool us into gaining our favor. Eitri said, with Fox here you have proven that we can trust each other. He looked at Harry and said, thank you for offering us a hand in friendship rather than asking us what we can do for you. Actually, Harry said, having a though, there are a couple of things we could use your help with, but this would be in trade. He opened 2 portals and deposited the metals back where they came from. Then he summoned one of his dearest items, the Sword of Gryffindor. This sword was crafted by the best smiths in my home world. Goblins had much the same legendary fame as the dwarves do here, and this is one of their works. I was told that all goblin steel had the ability to adapt and take in only that which makes it stronger. This was proven when a young boy was able to slay a 1,000-year-old basilisk with this very sword. Since then its edge has gained the ability to destroy anything, including things that are supposed to be indestructible, just as basilisk venom is said to be capable of doing. Harry said, levitating the sword closer to the smith. Much like Fiendfire, he thought to himself, be careful, one nick and you will die. Unless Fox decides he likes you enough. Natasha put in, Phoenix tears can cure anything. Fair enough, Harry conceded. Eitri was holding his hand close but not touching the sword. You modeled Urubane off its design but with some changes to accommodate your process, I see. He ran his energy through the blade and his eyes widened. That's impossible, he said. What? Harry asked. This sword lives, Eitri said. It's sampling my magic as I test it and growing immune to my magic as it does so. Magnificent, he exclaimed excitedly. So the Sword of Gryffindor finds your interest, Harry asked. Verily, Eitri said, I would give much to study this blade. If I could find the process used, I could create something like I have never done before, something that sits at the zenith above all weapons ever made. I'm glad I could interest you with something, Harry said. Rocket looked like he was going to explode from excitement. Could I help? I would very much like to help make a weapon that makes all other weapons seem like toys. This study might take me decades. Eitri said, Much as the craft of the dwarves took millennia to perfect, these master smiths from Harry's old world likely hid much of their processes with magic, and with what I have seen from Harry, it is entirely possible that this sword used blood as a catalyst for its capabilities. Understanding that, let alone copying it, would be a life's work for one as short-lived as yourselves. He apologized. Short-lived my furry behind. Rocket swore, Stark and Banner will have immortality figured out in the next couple of years, then I can spend many lifetimes on research and blowing shit up. He said, crossing his arms with a victorious smirk. Immortality? Eitri asked. It's something they will likely reach as they continue their study into alchemy. Harry said. Eitri considered this. It is possible that a magic from your old world will be needed to recreate this wonder. He said, pointing at the floating sword. Perhaps a bit of combined effort. He offered, looking at Tony. I don't see why not. Tony said, and if while we're in the process of figuring that out, we stumble across a way to make the conversion of metallic transmutations more efficient, then that will just help us all in the long run. How do you intend to use the adamantite? Eitri asked. Have you ever heard of something called a quantum supercomputer? Tony asked. Hold on, before you go down the rabbit hole that is Tony's plans for computing excellence, I need to ask you a favor off the books, as it were. Harry asked. What can I help with? Eitri asked, wondering if the other shoe was dropping. I need two things, Harry said as he pulled out a contract. Tony can tell you about this contract and what it does in a bit, but for now, I'd like to know if you can tell me where Niflheim is. Harry was soon directed to follow Radek to go speak to one of their elders. It had been a long time since anyone was allowed on Niflheim after all, and there were none alive among the dwarves who had been there, but there were records of a path the dwarves once knew of. When Harry arrived in the library, he was pointed to a blind old man sitting in a corner of a room filled with books, and caressing an old tome in his hand. Excuse me, sir, Harry asked respectfully. Yes, who am I speaking to? The old man asked, looking up. I don't know your voice. I am King Harry of New Atlantis. Harry said. Prince of Asgard, are you now? The old man asked with a smile. I have heard tales of a mighty wielder of magic by that description. That would be me. Harry said. I was asked to come speak to someone called Varko about the location or a path to Niflheim. You found him, Varko said as he stood up and started walking down an aisle. As he walked, he unerringly placed the book he had been holding in its place between a set of other books. The writing was strange, but Harry could tell the old man had returned a book to the rest of its set. As he reached the end of the aisle, he turned right and went down another aisle before stopping and reaching out to pull a book from its place. This is what you are looking for. Harry had needed to activate his flight to follow the old man, so he levitated the offered book out of the old man's hand. Thank you, sir, but I was hoping someone could read this for me. I'm not exactly from around here and this language is foreign to me. You mean you are illiterate? The old man asked. No, sir, Harry replied calmly and respectfully. I can read and write, but only in my native tongue and a few others from my home world, and I can only do that thanks to magic. Well, don't look to me for answers, Varko said grumpily. My eyesight left me years ago. The only reason I still have a use is because I still know where everything is. I am sorry to hear that, sir. Harry said. He had a thought then. If you suddenly found yourself capable of reading again, would you be willing to help me? If you are playing a trick on an old dwarf, you're a cruel man. Varko said dangerously. I do have the capability, but I don't know for certain if it will work with your physiology. Harry said. I am willing to give it a try if you are. If you can help me read my books again, I'll read you a book at bedtime till the day I die. Varko said vehemently. Okay then, let's go back to your bench. I'm going to try and cast the magic on one of your eyes first. Harry instructed. The old man moved faster than Harry thought possible and was soon seated in his seat. Harry chuckled. Do you prefer an eye for my first test? He joked. The left one. Varko said instantly. It was always my weaker eye. Harry shrugged and started gathering his magic. He didn't need a lot, but he needed it to be precise but also malleable. It needed to look for the optic cluster and input what his eyes should be seeing directly into that part of the brain. Now don't be shocked if you start seeing flashes or anything, and don't be shocked if you see something only for it to fade. I'm casting the spell temporarily only, to feel out if it works. If it does, I'll enchant something for you to see with. Okay. It sounds like you know what you are doing, Varko said excitedly. Good, Harry said, then he raised his hand and focused his will on the task at hand. When he released the magic, it went into the left eye and Harry could feel it working. Let me know if you see anything, he instructed. He felt as the magic moved around looking for something until it stopped, apparently having found something. I think something is happening, Varko said as he opened and closed his eyes rapidly. After a minute he sighed disappointedly. I thought I saw something for a moment, but it was gone before I could focus on it. You should have said so then. Harry shook his head. He had let the magic go when Varko was quiet too long. He reapplied the same magic. Now tell me if you're seeing anything, even if you can't make it out, he instructed again. I'm seeing something. I think, but it's fuzzy. Varco informed him. Perfect, Harry said. I can work with fuzzy. I can't, how will I read? Varco objected. Don't worry, Varco, I can take care of that too. Harry said as he looked around. You don't happen to have used glasses in your life, did you? Glasses, the dwarf asked. Never mind. Harry said, I'll just quickly pop home and fetch some supplies. Stay right where you are. Harry quickly popped to Friday's fabrication warehouse. Friday, I need some glass and stainless steel. Hello, Harry. Friday greeted him. She asked him some question and he soon had what he would need. He opened a portal again and went back to find the old man still sitting exactly as he had been. I'm back. Harry said, I think I've got what I need too. Harry started molding the wire frame of the glasses with his magic and soon placed it on the dwarf's face, asking the old man if it was comfortable. Harry didn't wear glasses anymore, but he was familiar enough with bad ones to know how to get them to sit better. When that was done, he separated just enough glass from the rectangular block he had been given to make basic clear glass for the glasses he was making. That would be the minimum requirement and all he'd need, since they don't need to be prescription for them to send the correct information to the brain. The enchantment handled focus after all. It should also fix any issues he had originally. When that was done, he removed the glasses from the old man's face and enchanted them right then and there. It took him all of 10 minutes. When he was done, the glasses were even damage resistant and had a charm to make it look like his eyes weren't milky white. He had made them the same color as Radix, except for a slightly paler shade of blue. He handed the glasses to the old man and instructed him to put them on. Varco did as instructed and Harry monitored the magic as it felt around again and settled into the right spot. Well, Harry asked, I'm seeing something, but it's strange. It's like everything is upside down and out of focus still. Varco observed. Of course, Harry realized. Your eyes are bigger, so your retinas work differently. He took hold of the glasses with his magic and turned the glass around so that the enchantment would send the info into the brain the other way around. Then he adjusted the input slightly for a different focus, trying to accommodate for how the old dwarf's brain would have interpreted sight. How's that? Varco was quiet as he looked around the room for the first time in years. Those bastards, Varco objected as he shot up and started rearranging his books. I can't be certain who has what at this rate. Then he stopped and looked at his hands as he realized what was happening. I can see. He whispered, then I can see. He yelled and jumped up and stomped his feet on the floor. He kicked up such a racket that other dwarves came running, weapons drawn, thinking the visitor was surely trying to kill the old dwarf. When they saw him dancing about as he laughed and repeated the same phrase over and over again, I can see, they changed their minds. Their visitor might be small, but he was mighty. None had seen Varco in a good mood in years. Suddenly the old man stopped and looked indignantly out the door. What are you looking at? Can't an old man celebrate being given the gift of sight again? Sorry, Varco. Came the repeated apologies of the men that had come to see what was going on. Then off with you. I promised King Harry help with finding some information. Varco said with a stern look on his face. When they left he mumbled, not used to anything are they? Then he smiled and winked at Harry. Harry decided he liked the old man. Something about him reminded him of a combination of Moody and Dumbledore. Then he picked up the book that was lying next to Harry. Is this the book I gave you? Yes, sir, it is. Harry said, damn, I was afraid of that. It seems that my filing system is no longer trustworthy. These are the records of the war during the 5th dynasty of anyway, it's not what you are looking for. Varco walked back to the section the book had been. Oh well, thankfully it was close by. He returned and opened a new book on a table. Let's see here, what is that book about if I may ask? Harry asked. Asking is free. Varco quipped with another smile. It's a book on the locations where the terrors invaded our realm from Niflheim. Terrors? Harry asked. That didn't sound good. Flying demonic creature that drives you insane and makes you relive your worst memories. Varco said, when we still lived on the planet, it was our greatest fear. They would strike when people were sleeping. You'd wake up the next day only to find out you'd lost a family member and all that remained was an empty shell. Dementors, Harry swore. Of course Niflheim has Dementors. Couldn't leave Hela on a planet with flowers, could we? We just had to put her on a land filled with creatures that tortured you with your worst memories for a snack. Damn it, Odin, what were you thinking? Probably that she'd be safe there. The old dwarf said as he continued to scour the book. What do you mean? Harry asked. The Aesir are immune to terrors, aren't they? Varco asked. Best guards you could think of for someone who is immune. Doesn't allow someone to visit, but also keeps enemies away. Then Varco seemed to find something he was looking for. Here, this will be your entry point. He moved the book so Harry could see. There, clearly marked on a map of Nidavelir's largest continent, was a symbol Harry had hoped to never see again. It was the mark of the Hallows. Harry had stared at the page for a full minute before Varco spoke up. Do you want me to copy directions down for you? You wouldn't need to memorize the page that way. Harry was still stunned but shook his head. He pulled out his phone and took a picture. As the flash went off, Varco blinked his eyes. What is that? Harry turned the screen so that Varco could see it. I took a picture. This is common technology from my world. This is marvelous, Varco exclaimed as he took the phone from Harry's hand. You can just copy anything like this. I can do even better, Harry said as he took the phone back. I can send it to anyone that has a similar device. To demonstrate, Harry sent it to Tony. See, now my pilot has the location as well. I can also send him instructions in either text or in my own voice. The conversation was helping. He was still shocked, but his occlumency was helping regain control. Text, Varco asked before getting a gleam in his eye. Could this device copy a book? I believe it could, Harry confirmed. Let me quickly find out. He pulled up Tony's contact and called. Their ship had an error which was standard for all PI/EPI ships so that they could stay in contact. Tony soon picked up. Harry, aren't you in the other room? Yes, I'm just demonstrating what a phone can do for Varco, Harry said. I also wanted to know if the phone could store books and if so, how many? Tony did some quick calculations while he replied, of course. Books, once digitized to text, could take as little as a 1 megabyte, so, considering the space on your phone, you should be able to store up to 130,000 books on your phone. Thanks, Tony, Harry said. Did you get the map? We were looking at it when you called, Tony confirmed. Are we going there today? We'll probably go to the site but not through the pathway. I'd like to check something. Harry denied. Okay, see you later. Eitri showing us the forge, Tony said and hung up. Damn it, I wanted to see the forge too, Harry whined, welcoming the change from the troubling thought. Well, Varco asked. Well, what? Harry asked. Books, boy, books, Varco insisted. Oh, right. Tony said my phone could potentially store over 100,000 books. Harry said, 100,000, the dwarf exclaimed as he sat down heavily. I could read a new book every day for the rest of my life and never run out of things to learn. Are you interested? Harry asked. Remember, not all of our books are educational. There's a large variety of everything from romance and comedy to science and science fiction. All of it in all the languages of my world. The old dwarf just smiled at him. You have obviously not been taught all speak. Do you think I'm speaking your native language now? Harry remembered Thor mentioning something like that. That's right, I still need to learn that. I'd suggest you put it at the top of your priorities if you want to read any of these books without me having to translate for you, Varco said. Not that I mind, of course. I would also like to request access to some of your books or stores of information. It would be great to have a new source of entertainment around here. I am too old to take part in training exercises. I'll make a note of it for you. I'm sure we can arrange access to a digital library. Harry said, I really do appreciate that, least of all my sight. Varco seemed to suddenly remember as he jumped up again and started humming a song as he started packing the books in the correct order. I'll be at this all day, he muttered. Harry thought he sounded happy at the prospect. He wondered if this dwarf was the exception or the rule. He had seemed to adapt so easily to the idea of seeing again that he had forgotten the fact almost instantly and went back to work. Shrugging his shoulder, he walked out of the library to find Radek waiting for him. He had apparently been listening the entire time, if the look of respect he saw was any indication. You truly are divinely gifted in the art of creation, Radek said. To have given a blind man his eyes back with only slight effort, also that he could find you a small amount of information. Your feat here today will be told to any who sees the old man suddenly having recovered his sight and spirits. He enthused. I wish I could say I invented the magic involved, but it is something I do for all of the people I can, Harry said. I can also create artificial limbs for those who lost them and sometimes even fix birth defects. When Radek's eyes bulged, Harry held up his hands. I'm not bragging, honest. I'd like you to spread the word though. If there are any in need, then I'll make the time to come help just as soon as I'm done with my current mission. Of course, King Harry, Radek said. I'll make sure there is a list made with priorities as needed. Thanks, Harry said. Where are you leading me, by the way? You said you wanted to see the forges, correct? Radek asked as they came to a large door which he swung open with ease. Welcome to the forges of Nidavellir. Harry was astounded at the sight. He had seen the energy being drawn from the sun for a moment as they approached the station, but what he was seeing now was much more, just more. There were fires burning in many locations with dwarves working at them, but their fuel seemed to be a large construct in the middle where he could see the spheres from the sun leading. So it works like a battery for solar energy, Harry murmured to himself. Not exactly, a deep voice said from off to the side. Eitri was leading the others to them. It's pure heat and power. So how many millions of degrees of heat can this battery take? Tony asked. Many, Eitri said with a smirk. I'm afraid I can't share the process of its creation. It is one of our dearest secrets. Fair enough, Tony said. Harry probably wouldn't even need that to work with Uru. He can melt vibranium with pure magic and a trick or two. Truly, Eitri asked. Would you be willing to try? Not today if you don't mind. Harry said, Fiendfire is dangerous in the best of circumstances. I'd rather not unleash it on a space station even if I can control it completely. He apologized. We also have to start moving. He turned to Tony. Did he sign? Yes, Tony said. I realized that you couldn't leave the sword here otherwise. You do intend to leave it here, right? I don't have any plans for it. Harry confirmed before turning to Eitri again. I realize I'm speaking to a weaponsmith, but I'm going to warn you again, not one scratch with that sword. If you even so much as nick yourself, you will die. You have warned me twice now. Eitri confirmed solemnly. I will make certain that my people know that you are not to blame if I end up killing myself accidentally. How about you just make sure you don't die? Harry asked. He looked around. Where's Rocket? He saw something and ran off. Natasha said. Loki went after him. Oh boy. Let's go find them. Harry said urgently. Why, what's wrong? Eitri asked. Rocket is a kleptomaniac and Loki is a prankster. Harry informed him. Put them together and leave them alone and things might end up becoming interesting. They found Rocket being magically restrained by Loki as he eyed a dwarf with a peg leg. What is it with you and prosthetics? Harry asked exasperatedly. Thanks, Loki, he said under his breath at Loki. What, can a guy have a hobby? Rocket asked. Harry spotted something. Is that a chunk of Uru in your satchel? No, I mean I brought this from home. Rocket lied badly as he winked at Harry very openly. Harry couldn't help it as he started laughing. You really are incorrigible. He used a summoning spell for stolen ore from the satchel and was surprised to find quite a bit of stuff flying out of the satchel. Is that an expanded bag? He asked. Rocket ignored him and huffed as the chunks of metal levitated in front of Eitri, who took them and threw the largest chunk back at Rocket. You may have that piece. If you find a way to manipulate it without the power of a sun, then you deserve it. Rocket cheered up and put it back in his satchel. He looked at Harry. What? I don't tell you not to magic. Don't tell me not to steal. Harry continued chuckling and caught a glance from Eitri. Fortunately, he wasn't upset as much as amused. It's not like Harry was lying to him. And the bag? Tony asked. Expanded space rune cluster. Rocket agreed. You'd be surprised what you can steal if people don't see you walking away with their stuff, especially when it's large stuff. Soon Tony and Rocket were discussing his rune cluster for space expansion, while Harry and Eitri discussed what he could tell them about his form of enchantment. From what Harry could tell, it would be very difficult to impossible for him to use their method. They may be able to use his runes though, so he drew Tony and Rocket back into the conversation as they made their way back to the ship. We'll be in touch. Harry greeted the Dwarf King. I promised Varco Books and Radek will be setting up a waiting list for magical prosthetics. What's this? Eitri asked as he turned to Radek. King Harry was able to restore the sight of Varco with enchanted glass things. Radek said lamely. They are called glasses or eyewear and they aren't really a necessary part since I can enchant eye patches and glass eyes as well, but I thought glasses would suit the librarian perfectly. Harry explained. Indeed, King Harry told me that he'd be willing to create these constructs for our people to replace lost limbs and correct disfigurement. Radek said excitedly. Not all disfigurement. Harry apologized. It depends on their physiology. If something is fundamentally different, it may be impossible. Eitri looked stunned at Harry. I thought you went to the library to find out about Niflheim. I needed someone to read for me since I don't know your written language. Harry shrugged. How quickly do you enchant? Eitri asked, shocked. He hadn't been gone all that long after all. He can do things pretty quickly. Natasha said proudly. He can enchant an item for intent-based flight in under half an hour. She said, referring to the carpets. Brooms were quicker, but more difficult to explain. Half an hour? Eitri asked. How do you summon such power so quickly? Harry just smirked and made his power ring visible. You have your batteries and I have mine. Eitri's eyes widened comically. I sense multiple times your normal power through that ring. How is that possible? Harry kept smiling, but Natasha replied for him. Just as your construction methods are secret, so are Harry's. How did you put it? It's one of your dearest secrets. Natasha is right, Harry said. I can't tell you how I made it, but it does allow me near instant access to massive amounts of stored energy. He let the ring vanish from sight again. How are you hiding it so that I can't even sense it? Eitri asked. That would be a whole other kind of secret. Harry smiled. Who knew Fidelius charms could be switched off and on again as long as they are kept small? Eitri nodded, finally understanding what Harry had offered with his friendship. So he lowered himself to one knee to get to Harry's level and held out a hand. Harry grew his hand comically but was able to grasp hands with Eitri. You will be a good friend to have. He said, you may call upon us if you are ever in need of aid, and tell your other brother that we will embrace an alliance based on equality as you have shown us you are capable. Likewise, if you have need of help you know who to contact, Harry said. Before he turned and entered the ship, they lifted off and started heading to the planet the long way. Should I stop so you can make a portal? I think we need to discuss something first. Harry said, everyone here but Rocket knows about the Master of Death. What's that? Rocket asked predictably. Loki quickly filled Rocket in with a nod from Harry. Summon the dead, Rocket asked incredulously. Nice, it's not something I chose, Harry said. Rocket just shrugged. I've seen stranger things, probably, Harry said with a nod. Anyway, he started. He told them of the significance of the symbol, and how he wanted to see the site to find out if it was just coincidentally used or if what he feared was true. He also told them of the horrors. If his fears were true, then he was meant to go to the indicated location. It was predestined, and he hated prophecies. Tony slowed them to a stop, and Harry opened a portal to just outside the atmosphere above the indicated location. They soon arrived on the surface and slowed the ship as they looked down on what seemed to be some sort of stronghold next to a large mountain. There was the remnants of an ancient road leading off to the side of the mountain and what appeared to be a collapsed cave, barely visible in the distance. What do you think? Harry asked nobody in particular. It looks like it was built to keep something in, Tony said, pointing at the obvious doors and the giant bars of solid metal blocking the door from opening from the outside. If this was built to block an opening from Niflheim, then it would explain the precautions. Loki said, there, Natasha said, pointing above the door where a triangle with a circle in it which was bisected with a line appeared. Seems to be an identifying mark. Does it mean anything, Loki? Nothing that I recognize, Loki said. It isn't unheard of for places of power to be marked with unique identifying symbols. He offered. No, Harry denied. There's something here. I can tell I'm meant to be here. I just don't know if I'm supposed to be here now or if I'm supposed to just continue with my plans to come back when I'm ready. I vote for when you're ready, Tony said. No offense, but these Dementors sound like we'll need some prep. Dementors, Harry corrected before nodding. I didn't intend to go today anyway. I'll need the help of Strange for what I have planned. Strange? Tony asked. Yes, Harry nodded in thought. Okay, we can go, he said. I'd rather we don't spend any unnecessary time here. Tony agreed and started them up and out of the atmosphere. When they were in the vacuum, Harry had Tony wait. Do you want to try something new I came up with? How untested is this? Rocket asked with a smile while Loki calmly tightened his safety belt. Completely, Harry said, smiling back. What's the plan? Tony asked. FTL, Harry said, magic style. Harry. I hate to break it to you, but your portals are already faster than light, Tony said. Not like this, Harry said as he connected with the ship again after closing his eyes. Point us in a direction, he told Tony. Tony adjusted the ship to point our tiny star, which was barely visible. Harry then pushed himself to maximum magnification and placed a portal. Then he let his magic connect to both sides of the portal to sample the distance. Then he allowed himself back into normal view while keeping the magic up, and told Tony go through slowly. Tony obliged and went through the portal. Once they were through, another portal appeared and Tony looked at Harry, who nodded, even with his concentration being fully occupied, so Tony went through that portal again. When another portal appeared, Tony decided to go through without asking. What are we doing, Harry? He decided to ask when he didn't understand. Look behind us, Harry said as he dropped the magic and closed the portal that had opened next. It was very draining, but completely manageable. Tony flicked a switch and the monitor in front of them flipped to the rear view of the ship. Did we just? Tony asked, shocked. What am I missing? Natasha asked. Tony jumped up and pointed out a very specific, barely visible star. We just came from there. Tony said, we just traveled light years by line of sight. He flicked the switch again and noticed something for the first time. The star I was aiming for is gone. That happens sometimes, Rocket said. Stars die out, but their light is still traveling to get to where we were. I knew that, Tony said, but then he got a wide smile. Do you know what this means? What? Harry asked. We can go back and see the star again and figure out when it dies so that we can monitor the event, Tony said excitedly. We could potentially witness a star's death and record it. I hate to break it to you, Tony, but I was on maximum magnification, and I didn't even know we were aiming for that star. I didn't see it vanish, so chances that we'll be able to see the event in any detail are very small. Harry said, that doesn't matter. I could probably use rocket space expansion runes to create a telescope that can see 100 times further than you can on your maximum magnification. Tony scoffed. You keep on forgetting I'm an inventor and a billionaire. Tony said, if I can imagine it, chances are I can make it happen. Harry just chuckled. We'll need to retrace our steps, but I don't see why not. Then he opened a portal to the lunar base. How far is your space station from launching? Our space station, Tony corrected him, should be operational and ready for occupation by the end of the year. I'm also almost done with the design of the craft that will take the occupants. Why do you insist on calling it our space station when you're doing all the work? Harry asked. Because you have a better name than I do, okay, Tony said with a bit of resentment in his voice. You can never get away from your past. People still think any project I'm involved in will be one that creates weapons. Claiming our companies are working together, however, has been proven to completely bypass that. He laughed sardonically. Apparently you keep me in line. Harry smiled at that. Stranger things have happened. He turned a new portal into being and the ship soon stopped at the lunar base again. We'll need to start planning tomorrow. I want to get whatever unpleasantness awaits me over with. I don't like living with such an unknown over my head. Harry said, why not just send a mirror through with a note and a contract? Tony asked, I don't think sending her magical artifacts is a good idea. Loki said, noting Harry nod along with him. She might have the ability to drain part of its magic and use it to other ends. That would be bad, Tony agreed. So we'll need some sort of gift basket, a non-magical way to communicate and a way to search for someone specific on the planet, right? He asked. Just about, yes. Harry confirmed. Hearing it put like that made it sound that much harder to achieve. I do have another idea about how to find her without having to step foot on the planet and breaking any laws. What did you have in mind? Tony asked. The next week was busy as they put together the care package. Sending an Erder would not work as that would set her up with a personal wormhole to Earth. Who knew how she could use that? No, they decided to find a way to space outside of the planet's atmosphere. If they could establish an orbit, they could use the ship to scout and its on-board Erder for communications. In the end, it was decided that they would need to go to the location of the hidden pathway. Have Harry use the ship's systems to look through the breach, and then open a portal through which he could scout further. Strange had been asked to help protect said portals with an opening to the mirror dimension, just on the other side of the portal. He agreed easily enough. Apparently saving Yao had been something that had gained Strange's trust and cooperation. Harry would have asked Yao, but didn't want to put any pressure on a person who was, for all intents and purposes, on their first holiday in centuries. Tony was in charge of setting up some sort of mobile communications hub, which would be deposited through a portal. Tony had offered to make an orbital drop pod, but Harry decided against it. Better to keep things simple and save cost if it wasn't absolutely necessary. Tony's part was done in hours. The thing that took the longest was planning for contingencies. A planet with demonic soul-sucking monsters, a goddess of death, and who knew what other horrors demanded being careful. It was around the second day of planning when Harry got a call from an irate Director Brand. Mr. Potter, I do believe you forgot to inform Sword about your plans to send Earth-based technology to a possible hostile planet. Brand said, imagine my shock when I had to hear about it from Director Fury of all people. I was made to look like an idiot. You know how much that man pisses me off. Brand said it all in a low, quiet voice. She was controlling her temper today, it seemed. People had asked Harry why she was in charge of Sword, and he gave them the same answer every time. She was driven, had the required skills, wouldn't take crap from anyone, including himself, and she knew her priorities. To mention the fact that she checked out on many different levels, and even Fury couldn't find fault with her besides having an immense dislike for her attitude, would have been overkill. I'm sorry, Director Brand, Harry said. This mission is a personal one, and I would like to handle this errand on my own. If it is a simple errand, you wouldn't mind coming to midnight to explain the plan, would you? Brand said with a smug smile. I'll see you in 10 minutes, she said, and closed the connection. She knows you can fire her, right? Tony asked, having heard the conversation. He also wasn't a fan, but then Brand didn't care who liked her. Her job was to protect the planet. Technically, I can't, Harry said. That power lay with the branch heads and Fury. I couldn't have people treat me specially when they are meant to do a job, so I needed to remove that kind of power from myself. If I want people to be able to tell me when I'm making a mistake, then they need to know I don't have veto rights or the final say in anything. It also removes the temptation from people to try and befriend him for advantages he could offer, Jarvis said from his office. When people start to worry about Harry having private armies, he can simply admit the truth. He started and funds an organization, but he doesn't have any power within the command structure, except to advise the current heads of international and intergalactic security. Every division has its own command structure, and even those at the top need to report to the World Security Council. Not that they need any specifics when it comes to your off-world missions. Rocket spoke up from Jarvis's lab where he had claimed a spot, having developed quite a liking for him. Jarvis was helping him develop a personal rune which, according to Rocket, would blow people's minds. Harry hoped he didn't mean literally. Don't look at me like that, I know about politics, he defended when he saw Harry's raised eyebrow. I just didn't know you knew about ours. Harry said, first rule of space, Harry. Rocket said. When you're in new territory, know who holds all the power and either befriend them or replace them. He said, that works for prison too. Harry chuckled when he saw the evil grin on the creature's face. You know what, Rocket, you're kind of cool, I know. Rocket said with a shrug as he continued working on a virtual rendering of the rune he was working on. Harry had never seen any rune that detailed before. He was zoomed into just a small piece and it looked like he was trying to add even more lines at that level. What are you working on anyway? Harry asked as he started getting ready to go report to Brand. My rune mastery project. Rocket said, if I can get this to work it will change what we can do with runes in a big way. Harry blanched. Wasn't your rune mastery about manipulating supermassive black holes? He asked with real worry in his voice. Nah. I was just messing with you. Rocket said. When Harry's face showed his relief, he said, I'm working on something even better. Jarvis nodded along. If he succeeds, I'll be wanting one of what he's planning on making. Harry decided he didn't want to know. He was better off getting his story in order before he went to Brand. At least with Jarvis involved, Harry didn't need to worry about accidentally destroying the planet. 3 hours later, Harry returned. Brand wasn't happy about everything he had been doing, meeting with the dwarves and exploring foreign planets without her clearance. She knew she couldn't stop him, but she expected Harry to follow the rules just like everyone else. He should be briefing her and then debriefing her as well so that she can help see where things are falling apart when they start to do so. Her job wasn't just to fire a cannon into space after all. She needed to ensure the safety of off-world personnel. Never mind that she'd prefer the golden goose to stay home, where it was relatively safe. Harry couldn't hold it against her, but wouldn't let it limit him. He ended up agreeing to submit memories of anything he did, and at least having Jarvis inform her of his movements should he go off-world, unless it was to visit friends or family. Brand accepted it since she couldn't get him to budge on that. By the end of the week, they had ended up ignoring all the plans in favor of a new one. They'd had to take the apparition ship, nicknamed TARDIS, which was the one they had taken to the quantum realm, to fit it with the insubstantiality runes for the phantom drive. Harry could power them manually if needed, since the entire car was outfitted with adamantite wiring. Fortunately, they could also incorporate a couple of extra MSC shells, since they wouldn't be apparating for standard rune-based propulsion. Rocket took it upon himself to outfit the car with a couple of mean-looking cannons, all protected by MI tech, of course, and set up a weapons station for himself on the bridge, where Tony had sat before. Harry helped him create a 360-degree rotating system that he could use to fire the cannons all the way around the car. Rocket loved feeling so in control of the cannons. Harry ended up adding one of the BFG cannons for Rocket, in case it became necessary. It was not nearly as powerful as a full 4-cannon array would be capable of, but it would still do some serious damage on short range. Even if the green plasma moved only at just under the speed of sound, it would still be devastating to any organism, living or dead. When they were ready, the team that would be going assembled and entered the car. Rocket was spending more time with Jarvis and Harry's team on Earth, while Quill and the Guardians did a couple of standard rescue missions for the Nova Corps, mostly broken down ships and such. The pay wasn't bad and it kept them from certain sectors of space, where the Kree were still out looking for them, since their mission to monitor their movements blew up on them. Tony had decided to be the pilot again, while Harry was co-pilot, even though Harry was in the captain's seat and Tony in the co-pilot's. Jarvis was keeping in contact with them from Harry's office, and with a host of mirrors around him so that he could help add protection by pointing out anything of interest. Natasha was seated by another set of monitors, these all monitoring the ship's internal systems. Any breaches or issues, and she'd be first to know. Loki had simply sat down at the table and sipped a cup of tea. He was only there to support Harry, so he couldn't actively take part in what they were planning. Fortunately, the law expressly forbade someone from stepping foot on the face of Niflheim. As long as they never actually landed, it should be fine. They ran a quick systems check and then took off out of the hangar and into space. Once they were certain everything was fine, Harry opened a portal for them and they appeared on Nidavellir, just outside of the large blocked doors. Activating Phantom Drive, Harry said as they rose up. He put his hands on the rods and powered the runes that made them insubstantial. Going through, Tony said they had tested and found that Uru was not, in fact, affected by being out of phase. Harry was glad his sword had blocked all those attacks, otherwise Natasha would have killed him if the dwarves didn't. So they rose up and dropped through the ceiling of the structure, which was still a whole lot of rock to go through, completely avoiding the metal bars that blocked the front door. Even so, Tony took it slowly while Natasha kept a strict eye on her systems. If they came to a barrier of some sort that blocked them while they were out of phase, it could damage the adamantite wiring and affect their phasing capabilities. "How are you holding up, Harry?" Natasha asked over her shoulder. "I'm fine," Harry replied honestly. So far it felt like normal rock and nothing else. The phantom drive didn't need that much power, but power requirements did go up the larger the object was. Fortunately, Jarvis had thought to add the adamantite wiring before Harry expanded the space inside the car, so he just needed to worry about the outside of the car. Pretty soon they were through the thick mass of rock and in a completely dark chamber. "Dropping phantom drive," Harry said before looking around. "I really hate cold, dark spaces like this." He said, "Well then, light her up," Tony suggested. Harry nodded and cast a lumos through the frame of the ship. Suddenly the entire inside of the building was reflecting bright white. "Whoa, a little bright there, Harry," Tony complained. Harry instantly dropped the intensity. "Sorry about that, I keep on forgetting how well adamantite conducts magic." "Feel free to forget it when you channel attack magic as well," Rocket chuckled. "Can't ever have enough of that." Harry smiled at him for a moment, before looking around again. "See anything?" he asked his friends. Tony pointed. "It goes down there." He had spotted a large hole at the far end of the chamber. When they reached the location, they looked down into the hole. There was a winding staircase carved from the stone itself around the outside of the hole. Apparently the dwarves had been working here. "Looks like some sort of excavation site. What do you think they were looking for?" Natasha asked, her eyes still affixed to their systems. "I haven't seen anything that would indicate one way or another, but this looks like igneous rock," Tony said, pointing at the wall of the hole they were slowly descending. "The mountain must have been a volcano at some point." "What could have been down here then?" Harry asked. "Metal," Rocket said, pointing to where he saw a glint in the wall. "The metal must be part of the planet's outer core. So the magma contains their most precious resource?" Tony asked. "It would explain why they were digging here, at least." He conceded. "It could even be something else which they used to produce Uru." Rocket said, "All I know is that I'd love coming back here to see what we can find sometime. Not if there are Dementors here." Harry said that reminded him, so he glanced at both Tony and Rocket to ensure they were both wearing their runed glasses. "If you couldn't see one," he started, "we wouldn't know where to run." Tony and Rocket said together, "Just in case." Harry had insisted Loki and Natasha carry their own ones on them anyway. They had been able to see the Patronus, but it was better to be careful. "It's like you think we're going to die or something," Tony complained, never looking away from the monitor which he had oriented to look down. "Why are you doing that?" Rocket asked. "Doing what?" Tony asked. "Orienting us horizontally while you fly vertically," Rocket said. "Because," Tony started before he realized they had gravity control in the ship. "Damn," he swore before correcting their orientation. "This thing sure goes deep," Harry said worriedly. "It's a mine, Harry," Tony said with a smirk. "The deeper you go, the better the stuff you get." There were a couple of passages going off to the sides where one vein or another were obviously followed, but Harry kept on telling Tony to continue on down as he somehow knew that's where he needed to go. Until he felt something stop. He warned quickly, almost jumping from his chair but controlling himself. Slowly ended the light spell, dimming it until it was almost completely out. There in front of them was some sort of distortion. "What are we looking at?" Tony asked. "That is a tear in reality," Loki said as he stood to walk closer to the display. "Not a pathway, and this was created by intelligent design." "Impossible," Tony said. "This is the first time I'm here." Loki turned around, but instead of the smirk they were expecting, a look of fear adorned his face. "This is not good. Whatever made this left the opening on purpose or couldn't fix it." Harry channeled his magic through the ship and tested the anomaly. In hindsight, he probably shouldn't have done that. This was obviously not what they thought they'd find, and he didn't even know what was going on. That being said, Harry looked up and said, "Guys, this is not a portal." There was no answer, so he looked around quickly only to realize he was alone. "What the hell?" "Not exactly," a voice said from somewhere behind him. Harry turned around and realized he was suddenly not on the ship anymore. Instead, he was suddenly standing in a well-lit, comfortably furnished room with a couple of couches and a coffee table. In one of the comfortable-looking chairs sat none other than Albus Dumbledore. Harry knew better than to fall for this, though. "You're not him." "Of course not," Albus agreed. Who are you?" Harry asked, not moving. "You really should take a seat. While we have all the time we might need, the tea will still get cold even here," the man insisted. "Where is here?" Harry asked. "Where are my friends?" "Your friends are fine," the man said, pointing to the side. An image appeared on the wall showing Tony, Rocket, and Natasha all looking at the breach as Harry sat and concentrated on his magic. "So are you, for that matter," the figure said. "What is this?" Harry tried again. "Well done, all you need now is how and why." The figure joked. "Relax, will you? I come in peace," he said, holding his pointer and middle fingers out in the peace sign. "Sit, have some tea, we have much to discuss." Harry was certain he shouldn't trust this person, but he hadn't felt a lick of magic and he didn't feel his own either. Completely powerless but unwilling to admit it, Harry sat down and poured a cup for himself before sitting back and taking a sip. "Thanks," he said dryly. "That's better," Albus said. "Now we can have a decent conversation, all civilized like." "Why did you bring me here and where is here?" Harry tried again. "I've removed us from time, we're currently inhabiting a moment between seconds." Albus said, "As for where we're in your head, is this like that time I met Albus at the train station?" Harry asked. If this being was in his head, chances were he/it knew about that anyway. "No, not really," it said, "and also, yes, kind of." "Could you stop looking like him then?" Harry asked. "Sure," it said and turned into a Labrador. "Is this better?" the dog asked. "Not really," Harry said, trying not to smile. It was rather comical watching a dog speak human words without human lips. Seeing the tongue move to make speech possible was quite interesting too. "What about this?" the voice asked, suddenly becoming a copy of Harry. "Does this look better? Does it meet with your approval?" "Hey, don't go wearing my face," Harry objected. "Actually, I could say the same thing. I am you after all," it said. That brought Harry up short. "You're what?" he asked, flabbergasted, in a manner of speaking, of course. It said, "Could you explain it to me?" Harry asked hopefully. "I can try," it said. "When the universes were formed." "Stop," Harry said. "I'm not going to be able to follow this, am I?" "Not really, no," it said. "Try it more simply then. Are you a human?" Harry asked. "No," it said. "Are you a god?" Harry asked. "No," it said. "Do you have family?" "No." "Are you actually here?" "Yes, but then I'm kind of everywhere, aren't I?" it said. "Well done, Harry, I can see you figured it out." "Death?" Harry asked with a look of dawning comprehension, the mark of the Deathly Hallows. "Would you prefer I look like this?" it asked, suddenly in a hooded black robe, looking like a skeleton with a scythe. "You humans have the strangest notions about me." "It's true then?" Harry asked. "I'm the master of death." He had always hoped, at least to a small degree, that it was just a coincidence or misunderstanding, that he could refuse the title or that he needed to make some sort of choice before it happened. Actually, that part was wrong, the figure said, taking a sip from its cup and spilling all over the place. "See, I can't even drink tea without lips." Then he turned back into Albus. "I'm staying this guy. At least you were inclined to speak to him when you first saw the face." "That's because I have a lot of questions for the old man," Harry objected. "Ask them then." Albus said, "Chances are I know the answer." "What do you mean they got it wrong?" Harry asked, changing the subject back. If he ever wanted answers, he'd get it from the man himself. "Okay, let's try this in words you might understand better." It said, "Remember Odin telling you that faith gives things power?" Harry nodded. "That's what I am. Enough people believed in death as an actual entity that I kind of popped into existence a couple of universes ago." "Universes?" Harry asked. "It's in a cycle, isn't it? It expands, then after everything goes too far apart, everything dies and it starts again, but only after everything crashes back together for another bang." He said. "How many times?" Harry asked. "Oh, many times," it said. "In fact, it's happening right now in a universe a couple of existences away." "What is happening?" Harry asked. "A universe is about to complete its cycle. That's why I decided to come speak to you now and left that message for you." It said. "What message?" Harry asked, but before it could answer, Harry knew. "The symbol for the Hallows, of course." It said. "Well, I couldn't really affect the world again. I just kind of inspired the person who chose the symbol for this place a while back. It's not an uncommon symbol in an infinite amount universes, let alone multiverses, but I knew it would get your attention. Let me tell you, that's one of the tiring parts, so many duplicates of everything and everyone." Then it looked at Harry. "Except for you, that is." "Me?" Harry asked. "Yes, you," it said before turning back to the subject. "I come to you now because I'm taking a break, with that other universe not having gained any life, not yet anyway. I have a bit of free time." "How does that work?" Harry asked. When it opened its mouth, Harry reconsidered. "Never mind, I just know you're going to try and give me a headache." It smirked at him. "Okay, let's carry on." Then it sat back and said, "So I'm death and I exist, but not in any kind of physical form, but all these creatures and people personify me an infinite amount of times, so now I exist and I need a body. Thus I have a problem. If I don't take control of my own existence, I might be forced into that skeleton thing, or something not of my choosing. I'm with you so far to a degree." Harry said. "Good," it said. "So I'm going about my business when I realize that I need to catalyze my own existence. Enter the Peveril brothers. I've been through the cycle a couple of times and knew how to affect things to bring about your existence." "Wait, what?" Harry asked, shocked. "It's true," it said. "I'm not your father or an ancestor or anything, but still, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't exist. So I'm what, a body for you to take over when you're ready?" Harry asked, suddenly afraid and knowing he didn't have access to his power. Even the ring on his finger wasn't doing anything. "Don't be stupid," it scoffed. "I don't want a body, I just want to do what I do. You keep doing what you do and we'll be fine." "Why then?" Harry asked. "Oh right," it said. "There is a loophole in how these things work. If there is a person who is imbued with my power, my designated spokesperson of sorts, then I don't have to worry about people trying to control my power. like that fucking Thanos guy, he gives me the willies. Wait, you know about Thanos? Harry asked, and he gives Death the willies. Harry shuddered at the concept. This Thanos was obviously a bigger threat than he thought. Don't worry about it, as long as you keep going the way you are, things will work out, it said. But be careful anyway. While you can't be killed, those you care for still can, and you don't have the power to bring back the dead, not permanently anyway. Harry nodded before frowning. Wait, you never said why you needed to have me be born. Why not like literally anyone else? Because you, Harry Potter, are the culmination of many generations of powerful and influential people. Your power was great to begin with and uniquely qualified to benefit from a connection to what I can provide. You also care about people and would never abuse your power. Your experience makes you unique as well. It said, I can tell you that most people who have gone through what you went through wouldn't stop to incarcerate bad people and offering them second chances. You've literally blamed yourself for billions of deaths and still refuse to kill needlessly. If there's one thing I hate, it's needless death, even though I am powerless to do anything about it. What do you mean you're powerless? Harry asked. You were capable of creating the Hallows and affecting the world through them. Exactly, it smiled sadly. I can't do that for just anyone. If I hadn't stepped in, the Peveril brothers would have died before your line was ever brought into existence. By making that single change, I affected the entire course of the history of your world. I'm sorry to say, because of my intervention, Tom Riddle Jr. happened. What? Harry jumped up incensed. You did that? You caused the death of an entire world? Why do you think I needed you? It asked, also standing up, for the first time raising its voice. The only way I could make a difference was by setting in motion the creation of the Master of Death. That also set in motion the creation of Tom Riddle Jr., son of Merope. Gaunt, daughter of Marvolo Gaunt, descendant of Cadmus Peveril. A line that only existed due to Cadmus, the second brother's, survival that day. Harry lost all color and felt sick. It continued, that's right, you and he were very distantly related. He'd be your cousin like 30 times removed. This did not settle Harry's stomach. If it makes you feel any better, the woman Cadmus lay with to continue that line was a common harlot from a branch family of the original Slytherins. It doesn't, Harry said. He took a couple of breaths before looking up. Let me get this straight, your death. You wanted to be in control of your own destiny, which I can understand, frankly. But for you to do that, you had to do something that you knew would bring an end to my world, just so that I can be born, for you do dump the responsibility of being your representative in this world on. Is that right? No, you're my representative on any world that ever will exist. Death is a super omniversal constant, after all. I exist throughout all time and I permeate all of every existence. It said, also you do have the responsibility of fixing that as well. Fixing what? Harry asked. Your old world, Death said, but you don't have to worry about that right now. You'll know when the time is right. That Yao fellow is a frightfully intelligent man. Yao is a woman, Harry corrected. Oh right, sorry, different world, I get them mixed up sometimes. It apologized. Anyway, there are some aspects of the future better off unknown. I can tell you though that if you ever tire of this world, I can take you to the next one. You can be my representative wherever you are. The fun thing for me is that you can change things and I get to see a new cycle start with every new universe you visit. Harry was dumbfounded. This is a lot to take in. He finally said, I understand. Death said, take your time. We literally have forever, even though we won't be seeing each other often. I have to wait for special occasions before I can take a literal moment like now. What do you normally do? Harry asked, strangely intrigued what a being or existence on this scale would find interesting. Oh, there's a bunch of things. Death said, I like to go visit realms of constant change, places unaffected by my stopping the flow of time like I'm doing now. Or I take a step back and look into the eternity of everything forever. A moment of that can be very entertaining. Harry was holding his head. I'm sorry I asked. You should have known better. Death agreed. Can I ask a question? Harry was somehow shocked that this entity that knew everything that happened over the entirety of existence wanted to ask him a question. All he could do was nod. How are you enjoying life? Death asked with a sad smile. It was with a sudden shock that Harry realized this entity must never get the opportunity for a conversation. From its perspective, this must be a first. So Harry sat back and started chatting with the entity, telling it about his experiences and asking questions of interest. He was finally able to get some answers about the afterlife even. Death did swear him to secrecy though. Apparently he wasn't supposed to know either. That's how Harry found out there were other entities out in the universe which were omnipresent and all-knowing. By the end of their visit, which felt like days, but also minutes in this strange, timeless place, Harry felt he knew the entity better than anyone alive, which was a funny thought. When he shared it with Death, he laughed and shared another thought that made him laugh himself, but Harry couldn't understand. Upon thinking about it later, he couldn't even remember what was said, even by Pensive. When Harry felt the need to return to his people, Death allowed it with a warning. Don't let anyone tell you what death is supposed to be like or when I'm supposed to come. You know me. You will always know better than anyone what is right when it comes to me. I'll keep that in mind. Harry allowed. Bye. Death said. Bye. Harry said. Are you leaving? Tony asked, having heard Harry greet Death. Then he noticed the anomaly vanishing. What just happened? The rift just vanished. Loki said, looking at Harry, who was still reaching out to the space with his magic through the rods. Did you just close a rift in reality? Harry's face was a blank mask as he allowed his magic to subside. He was quiet for a moment before replying, let's rather say I know now why it was there and I was able to facilitate its closure by having its purpose be fulfilled. Harry, Natasha asked, what just happened? She could tell something big had just happened. Her connection to Harry felt like it had been reset somehow. Like he didn't exist for a moment and her ring just reconnected to him. It's going to be difficult to explain. Harry waved it off for now. Let's rather focus on what we came here for, shall we? Natasha's eyes narrowed before she nodded and turned back to monitoring the systems. Tony was already moving them forward, still avoiding the spot where the anomaly had just been. Rocket didn't seem to care, as his trigger finger was itching and he really wanted to test the BFG for himself. Loki was still looking at Harry. Had it been anyone else, he'd have tried entering his mind to find out what had just happened. He could feel the aftershock of something immense having happened, and whatever it was, it scented on Harry. When they reached the bottom of the very long shaft, they found one last corridor moving off in the direction of the mountain, at the end of which Loki and Harry could both feel the passage open before them. This is it, Harry said as he cast an illusionary path for them to follow through the rods. He looked to Tony. Remember the plan? He said seriously. Of course, Tony said. The moment we're through, you're making us intangible. We go straight up and out of the atmosphere where you open a portal for us to go home from. Good, Harry said. Rocket, I shoot anything that tries to follow us, he said with a smile. If there are Dementors, they will sense us the moment we're close by. Harry agreed. I'll be telling you if any of our systems are affected by anything. Natasha confirmed without being prompted. Okay, Harry said before taking a deep breath and letting it out slowly. Let's get this over with. Full speed ahead, Tony said as he accelerated them through the passage where Harry had outlined it for him. Soon enough they came out in the middle of some sort of crater, the impact of a meteor having helped in the creation of the portal or uncovering it. Tony shot straight up and they started ascending. I'm seeing something, Rocket shouted. Harry looked over at him and saw what he meant. It was as they had feared. There were Dementors and many of them. Fire, Harry said. Don't need to tell me twice, Rocket said with a smile as he opened up with both of his normal cannons. As Harry expected, the normal weapons fired right through them without even slowing them. Trying with BGF, Rocket said when he spotted the same thing. Harry pressed his release button, noting that the things were closing in on them even as they increased their speed. BFG unlocked, he said, and Rocket fired the first shot. As Fury had noted on Midnight that first time, there was a recoil from the cannon as it fired its magical payload of green plasma. It streaked towards the horde of incoming soul suckers, and while the first few avoided it, it still impacted on one of them and did what it was supposed to do. A concussive wave of force energy exploded from the point of impact, blowing hundreds of the creatures to pieces. That's what I'm talking about, Rocket cheered. You have to get me one of these, Harry, he said as he fired again into the next wave of incoming enemies. Still, with so many dead or at least dissipated, it seemed that they were just a fraction of these creatures, as thousands swarmed after them, attracted by the large group already racing to catch up with their prey. Rocket didn't mind as he aimed into the center of each wave until he shot his 8th shot. That last shot was technically unnecessary as the creatures had been pressing it, trying to fly that high. They soon had to stop as they couldn't fly that far from the surface anymore. I suspect our oldest sibling either knows or soon will know that someone was here, Loki said. I bet she felt that. Natasha nodded. If I could feel it, there's no chance she didn't. Good, Tony said. We won't have to look too far if she comes to investigate. Let me know when we are outside of the atmosphere, Harry said as he let up on the Phantom Drive. He didn't want to test what would have happened should the function only help the creatures get to them, though Harry suspected the many layers of runes and shielding meant to protect from other dimensional stresses would block them from so much as touching the outer shell that still looked like a Humvee. Will do, Tony said. Should be a couple of minutes still. Thanks, Tony, Harry said with a smile as he continued to watch Rocket's image of the rear of the ship. where the Dementors had given up and started moving off, all in the same direction this time. You keeping an eye on their destination? He asked Rocket. Yeah, Rocket replied. You sure you can't load another MSC shell? This BFG thing is fun. Too bad it takes so much energy. Did you ever figure out how to increase the amount of energy you could store in one of those? He did, Jarvis said from Harry's office. He could potentially increase their capacity twice over, but the enchantment factory can't duplicate that process, so we'd need to start using real shells again rather than conjured ones. That's too bad. Rocket said, then he looked at Harry with puppy dog eyes. What do I need to do to get one of your super shells? Those are not available to anyone at this stage. Harry said, sorry, but I'm not anyone. Rocket objected. What would you use it for? Tony asked. I know what you are studying. You shouldn't need that much power. Rocket mumbled something unintelligible until Harry asked, what was that? I said, Rocket began, I don't need it, but it would be nice to not have to come asking Brand for new shells. I couldn't even find them to steal one or two last time I went looking. Harry chuckled. Yeah, that would be very difficult. It's protected magically. Brand insisted on multiple layers of security. You know, your magic is so convenient sometimes that it's inconvenient. Rocket said, that's what I said. Loki laughed. I wonder how Darcy is doing these days. He asked contemplatively as he remembered the occasion. He had been disappointed that he wouldn't be able to rub lotion on her skin at the time due to Harry's magic making it unnecessary. She recently broke up with her boyfriend. Harry said offhandedly. She's single, Tony and Loki asked at the same time. What's your interest in her? Loki asked Tony. Wasn't he with Pepper still? Well, Tony said, I was hoping to hook her and Cap up. He needs someone to loosen him up. She's too much of a woman for him. Loki scoffed. He'd be running for the hills when her confidence becomes too much for him. Not to speak badly of Darcy, Natasha said, but Loki is right. Darcy is too experienced and worldly. He wouldn't be able to spend 10 minutes alone with her. Why are you looking for mortals to hook up with? Tony asked. I thought your parents would disapprove. They used to until Harry convinced them we were old enough to make mistakes as long as we knew the consequences. Loki said, now I can finally have a bit of fun as long as I don't do anything rash. Consequences could still happen. Harry warned, do you have a spell to ensure you don't cause pregnancies? Aren't women on Midgard expected to know when they are receptive? Loki asked with a frown. They do for the most part, but accidents still happen. Natasha said, rather be safe than sorry. Unwanted pregnancy is something that happens here all too often. Then she turned to Loki, and it's considered common courtesy for the man to have protection even if it's unneeded since it protects both partners. I don't need to worry about that. Jarvis said. Jarvis, Harry and Tony said at the same time, Harry with a smile and wishing he could high-five him while Tony looked affronted. I meant to say we're not moving that fast. Jarvis objected with a deep blush. Tony sighed in relief. Don't scare me like that. I suppose it is a good idea to wait a bit. Harry said it is customary to wait until people are in their late teens. 15 to 18 statistically. Jarvis said, and I'm not telling you when or if I do, that will be a private affair when or if it happens. Just do me a favor, do what you do or don't do at her place. Tony asked with a whine. No. Harry objected. You're supposed to spend a bunch of time in your room with her, listening to loud music so that you freak Tony out. It's tradition. Jarvis smiled. Why would you do that, Harry? Tony asked, having noticed Jarvis' smile. I thought we were friends. I'm also Jarvis' friend. Harry said, with you as the parental figure, who else is he going to annoy as he goes through his rebellious phase? But you're giving him ideas. Tony objected. He's not going to school, where he can be influenced badly and learn. Harry said, a point in his favor. Tony countered, and Harry is the cool uncle. Natasha said with a smirk, a point against him. Tony said, then there's the fact that I'm my own person and will choose who I wish to emulate if anyone on my own. Jarvis said, and I'd not expect anything else from you. Harry said with a smile. Jarvis smiled at Harry. See, cool uncle. Natasha said with a smile of her own as Tony frowned. I don't identify with Harry other as a friend, though. Jarvis said, friends are the family you choose. Loki said wisely, point. Jarvis conceded, we're here. Tony said with some relief, slow us down please and let's look at this planet. Harry asked. He could have looked by rocket, but the main window was much better and showed the complete impressive image. What they saw was a completely white planet with one stretch of land visible all the way around the equator. What land they saw was all desert. I thought hell was supposed to be warm. This place looks frigid. Tony said, hell is the place where spirits find their resting place. It is not the hell you think of. Loki said, do I need to point out the Dementors? Tony asked incredulously. Hell is a place for those who believe as your Norse did. There are different places for those who believe differently. Loki said, it doesn't matter anyway. The terrors can only devour living souls. From those who still draw breath. Once the victim dies, the spirit is released to its afterlife. So they don't torment the dead then. Tony asked. The dead don't interact with the living world, Loki said before he looked at Harry, normally at least. Harry was watching the planet again. He knew he couldn't try to sense anything magically. The distance was too great anyway. We're still going to struggle finding her. Harry said meh. Tony scoffed. We just put Friday on it. I'll be able to set up something for that in a day. Provided we can drop it off in orbit here with one of your portals. Awesome. Harry sighed in relief. That will save us a bunch of trouble, I think. Taking one last look at the planet, Harry opened a portal and they went back home. The moment he and Natasha stepped into the house, she gave him a look that said she wanted answers.